Through the fog, Leo clutched the crimson edge, following the trail of blood Raoul had left behind. Over here, Evelyn's voice called out from nearby. Even though he'd shaken off Helena, her tentacles had left several deep puncture wounds in his side. As a bloodkin, Evelyn was born with an extreme sensitivity to the scent of blood. In team mode, the three of them shared location markers, so after breaking through the fog in the square, Leo quickly caught up to the knight, Raoul, who was trying to escape. "I'll kill you!" A voice thick with malice suddenly roared through the air. A frigid killing intent washed over him. Leo instinctively dodged to the side. A split second later, a standard-issue longsword of the Order of the Holy Edict sliced through the air where he'd been. Leo parried with a backhand block, but the force of the blow nearly dissipated his crimson edge. The biting sword energy grazed his neck, sending a cold sweat down his back. But Helena and Evelyn's support arrived immediately. In an instant, tentacles wrapped around Raoul's ankles, and a massive blood-red scythe descended from the sky. With a flash of crimson light, Evelyn's strike landed with immense force. The scythe cleaved through Raoul's body, splitting him in two. Evelyn landed softly, frowning at the corpse on the ground. "That's it. Be careful." Leo kept his eyes locked on the body, instinctively pulling Helena back. He could see the corpse twitching slightly, and from the bloody cross-section, a wisp of black, ethereal light began to emerge. "You play dead, too?" Evelyn sneered, swinging her blood scythe at the remains once more. This time, however, the attack had no effect. The corpse exploded, and a shapeless, pitch-black creature slithered out of Raoul's husk, easily deflecting Evelyn's scythe. "What is that thing?" P6.I agents had already started to surround them, opening fire on the strange black entity. But the high-caliber alchemical rounds that struck its body seemed to melt into soft gelatin, causing only ripples to spread across its surface. It was completely unharmed. As everyone watched in astonishment, the black mass grew more grotesque. It flowed and shifted, gradually sprouting tentacles and organs that resembled limbs and a head. The completely amorphous black silhouette didn't bother fighting back. Instead, it weathered the fierce barrage and charged toward the edge of the fog. "Don't let it get away," Leo shouted. He couldn't let it summon the outer god again. Everything that had happened in the square, the second prince, the city guard, the defused bombs, it was all a charade, a performance he'd had Ophelia stage for the true mastermind. If this thing escaped, discovered the ruse, and reached the crowded streets of downtown, the chaos would start all over again, fulfilling the conditions for the summoning. The chase was on. Outside the square, the gunfire intensified. One of the P6.I agents roared and leaped into the air, transforming into a hulking giant mid-flight. He brought his massive foot down on the black creature. The agent intended to crush the unknown life form, but the black thing moved with impossible speed, burrowing into his body. The giant's muscles began to spasm violently. With a final, agonizing scream, his massive frame exploded, showering everyone in a grotesque rain of viscera and gore. Seeing the black creature racing toward the buildings outside the square, Leo glanced skyward. Hidden in the shadows, Ophelia acted. The city block in front of the creature suddenly became a barren wasteland. All the buildings that could offer cover or hiding spots vanished. As if trapped by a ghost-built wall, it found itself right back in the ruined square. The Dreamlands has its limits. Ophelia's power is less stable the further out it extends. Leo yelled to Evelyn and Helena. "We have to kill that thing before then." The black creature's speed began to slow, another of Ophelia's manipulations. On the now empty street, rubble and debris began to lift slowly into the air, as if gravity itself had ceased to exist. Apparently cornered, the black creature thrashed violently and grotesquely grew a human mouth. It let out a defiant, furious roar. Leo couldn't understand the words. It wasn't a human language, but the sound was grating and shrill, filled with a desperate, feverish energy. The noise echoed across the ruined square and spread even further. Every human in the area instinctively clapped their hands over their ears. The sound was a psychic assault, causing many of the agents to tremble uncontrollably. Leo noticed with a jolt that Helena and Evelyn were shaking violently as well. "Don't let it succeed." Seeing the other supernaturals on the verge of being driven mad, Leo gritted his teeth and charged forward, pushing through the psychic onslaught. The thing obviously knew it couldn't escape and was making a last-ditch effort to summon the god, to create one final wave of chaos. But this time, Director Fredericks beat him to it. Leo barely saw how Fredericks cast his spell. It was almost instantaneous. A terrifying, explosive crack echoed through the air, a deafening thunderclap that made everyone's ears ring and finally silenced the mind-shattering noise. The black, gelatinous creature shattered into countless pieces, splattering a foul-smelling, black liquid in every direction. After the blast, every agent on site breathed a collective sigh of relief, nearly collapsing to the ground in exhaustion. Helena clutched her forehead, looking at Fredericks in awe. That guy, he's incredible. Evelyn had recovered as well. She smiled. He's a 60-year-old supernatural who hasn't gone insane yet. Of course he's incredible. Leo frowned at the black liquid covering the ground, refusing to lower his guard. The slowly writhing puddles still possessed a spark of life. He worried the creature could reform. Fortunately, the power of the Dreamlands shifted the architecture again. The square expanded outward, every nook and cranny suitable for hiding flattened into smooth ground. Even the sewer grates, perfect escape routes for the black liquid, vanished completely. Ophelia had sealed off every possible exit. Nice work, Leo murmured, glancing toward a distant building where Ophelia was hiding. With Ophelia's assistance, the agents painstakingly cleaned up the last drop of the black fluid. The troublesome black eel had finally lost all signs of life. A wave of excited cheers erupted from the crowd. Leo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He wasn't in the mood to celebrate, though. He just quietly walked toward Ophelia's building. His mind drifted back to that day at the estate. He knew Ophelia had to be at her limit. She had never manifested the Dreamlands on such a massive scale before, and he couldn't help but worry. As he thought this, the scenery around him began to warp, overlapping and fading until everything returned to the familiar architecture of downtown New Haven. Leo ignored the confused and startled crowd, walked straight into the building, and made his way to the roof. From a distance, he could see Ophelia collapsed near the edge. Knew it. She pushed herself too far, he thought with a wry smile. He walked over and gently lifted her into his arms. Just as he was about to turn and leave, a little girl's giggle echoed nearby. The sound, so close, seemed to freeze the blood in his veins. He whipped his head around and saw her, a little girl with slightly dark skin, sitting on the roof's edge, playfully swinging her bare feet. You! Leo's mouth fell open, his eyes wide with shock. How was she still here? Wasn't it all over? Had the black creature's final summons worked after all? Were the conditions for the god's descent still met? Was everything I did completely useless? The feeling was indescribable, especially when the little girl's gaze slowly turned toward him. Nyarlathotep Outer God Affinity. 12 threat level. Infinity. Warning. Extremely dangerous. Do not engage. Description. The crawling chaos. Incarnation of fear and pandemonium. Its greatest joy is driving humanity into terror and despair, leading to ultimate madness. The moment the affinity notification popped up, Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. Holy shit, you can romance an outer god. For a second, he thought his brain had broken, that he was hallucinating. The dark-skinned little girl looked at the completely frozen Leo, blinked, and tilted her head with curiosity, seemingly fascinated by the human before her. As dusk settled, the oppressive fog that had blanketed the city for days finally began to recede, perhaps due to a rise in the day's temperature. The silhouette of downtown New Haven gradually emerged. Haphazardly constructed buildings stretching vertically, countless towering smokestacks, and massive factories entwined with a web of steam pipes. The once silent district seemed to spring back to life as the first lights flickered on. It was still grimy, still carried a foul, lingering smell, but there was a rare sense of normalcy, a feeling that everything was returning to a hard-won peace. For them, it seemed, the nightmare was over. Cheers rose from the streets below. From the sound of it, they were the officers who had taken part in the operation. He could faintly hear them laughing, making plans to drink at a tavern until they couldn't stand. The jubilant atmosphere was so infectious that even Leo felt a pull to join them. It was only natural. Everyone had been on edge for over half a month. But they were celebrating too early. Leo silently watched the little girl sitting on the edge of the roof, a cryptic smile playing on her lips. A far greater, more severe crisis had already arrived. They seem quite happy, don't they? She glanced at the celebrating crowd below, looking somewhat bored. She pouted. How dull. So uninspired. Then, she turned her gaze back to Leo. By comparison, she seemed to find the human before her much more interesting. How did you do it? The little girl asked, blinking curiously. The atmosphere became unnervingly quiet. Leo stared back at her in silence. How'd he do what? Was she asking how he'd stop the conspiracy? That part was simple, Fail the level, learn from your mistakes, reload the save, and try again. But he could never say that out loud. He forced a smile, trying his best not to look as terrified as he felt. Just trying to stay alive, that's all. So humble, the little girl giggled. I saw everything. Those people are idiots. If it weren't for you, this city would have been dead long ago. You're a great hero, she said, beaming at him. Leo had no idea how to respond. He'd never had a conversation with a genuine outer god before. He couldn't begin to fathom what this terrifying entity was thinking, why she wasn't wreaking havoc on New Haven, but was instead sitting here making small talk with him, as if they were old friends. It completely upended his mental image of an elder thing. But on second thought, maybe she really was just bored. After all, her profile described her as the incarnation of fear and chaos, someone who enjoyed watching humans descend into madness. In other words, she was a troll. She lived for the drama. And unfortunately for him, he seemed to have become her entertainment. When the girl saw that Leo wasn't speaking, only watching her with wary eyes, she didn't get angry. Her smile simply deepened. In humanity's short history, there have been plenty of great heroes who eventually rotted and fell from grace, she said, studying him closely, as if she'd just thought of something amusing. I'd love to see what you look like after you've fallen. You'd be so delicious, so delightful. Looking at that innocent, childlike smile, Leo couldn't help but shudder. A great being, such as yourself, shouldn't need to waste your thoughts on an ant like me. It's not worth your time or effort. He laid on the flattery while subtly glancing down at the street below, searching for an escape route. Of course, escaping from an outer god was practically impossible. He was just planning his next move. Worst case, he'd just have to start over again. Next time, he would crush that knight, Raoul, completely and utterly, right from the start. As he was thinking, the little girl shook her head with a smile. How could it not be worth it? Anything that makes me happy has value. With that, she hopped lightly off the ledge and slowly walked toward him. Only then did Leo get a chance to study her appearance. Besides her slightly dark skin, she had a long, unruly strand of hair sticking up from her grayish-white locks. When she smiled, she revealed small, sharp canines. She looked no different from any cute elementary school girl. But she wasn't cute at all. And the thing she'd just said, she seemed dead serious. She was truly looking at him like prey, trying to figure out how to ruin his life just to provide herself with some trivial amusement. The thought sent a chill down his spine. At that moment, the girl's interest seemed to shift to Ophelia, who was still cradled in Leo's arms. She frowned slightly, as if she smelled something she disliked. So it's that one. The girl glanced at Ophelia, then looked back at Leo with a hint of disdain. You seem to care about her a lot, don't you? Leo froze. That one. Who was she talking about? The elder god, Nodens? And what did she mean by asking him that? Whatever it was, it couldn't be good. He instinctively held Ophelia tighter, but he didn't expect what happened next. Almost instantly, the little girl let out a mischievous laugh. She giggled and pointed at the woman in his arms. Leo looked down sharply. Ophelia's head was lolling lifelessly to the side, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Ophelia, he cried, shaking her frantically, then desperately caressing her face. He was horrified to find her skin had turned ice cold. Her body was now a rigid corpse. Ophelia had stopped breathing. She was dead. Leo held her cold body, his mouth open, wanting to say something but unable to form the words. He had never imagined such a turn of events. He felt the world spin around him. You! Leo gritted his teeth, glaring at the smiling perpetrator. This is between us. Why did you go after her? The little girl feigned shock, looking as if Leo had frightened her. You don't like it? Like what? Are you out of your mind? Don't think I'm afraid of you, just because you're an outer god. Leo was at his breaking point. With Ophelia dead, he didn't plan on living either. He whipped out his revolver. First, he aimed it furiously at her. Then, he pressed the barrel to his own temple. There's still a chance. There's still a chance. It's just 3/4. I still have 3 reloads left. Next time, I'll kill that bastard Raoul right away. I'll destroy that black eel. I never want to see this thing again. Seeing Leo's enraged and desperate gesture, the little girl's smile only grew wider. At first, you seemed so calm and composed, not even nervous to see me. I thought you weren't afraid of anything. So this is what you're most afraid of, she said, a look of dawning realization on her face, as if she had discovered his greatest weakness. As Leo's anger intensified, she quickly added with a laugh, Hee, don't be mad. I was just kidding. Leo stared at her, stunned. He immediately looked down at Ophelia in his arms. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing steady. She was nestled in his embrace, sleeping peacefully. She looked nothing like a cold corpse. "You were messing with me?" Leo lowered the gun, glaring at Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep smiled back at him. "I'd love to take credit, but my true self isn't here." She sat back down on the edge of the roof, looking down at the square where the battle had taken place with some dissatisfaction. "Useless thing, summoning me with such a fuss. I thought there'd be something fun to see. But this is it? What a lack of sincerity." Leo watched her with a blank expression, holding Ophelia even tighter. But Nyarlathotep turned back to Leo, her eyes fixed on his face. "I did find something much more interesting." Affinity 20. When the system notification popped up, Leo's mood soured completely. Being targeted by a terrifying entity like this was definitely not a good thing. It was like winning the lottery, but the prize was stepping in dog crap with your first step out the door, and then stepping in it again with every subsequent step. What kind of luck is this? The only silver lining, he thought glumly, was what she'd said earlier. Her true self wasn't here. It seemed Raoul's last-ditch effort hadn't been very effective. The chaos in the city was limited, which meant the god's power here was also limited. Maybe she'd be leaving soon. Leo desperately hoped this annoying pest would get bored and go home, leaving him alone. As if sensing his impatience, Nyarlathotep changed the subject. She asked with a grin, "You're not from this world, are you?" The word struck Leo like a physical blow. He never imagined his biggest secret would be exposed so casually. He didn't know if she could truly see it or if she was just guessing, but all he could do was force himself to remain calm, to keep his expression blank. "I don't know what you're talking." Before he could finish, an indescribable, terrifying pressure enveloped him. His brain felt like it was being pierced by needles. He couldn't move a muscle as cold sweat poured down his face. Since arriving in this world, he had never felt such terrifying power. His sanity was high. He'd even thought himself immune to the kind of backlash other supernaturals suffered. But this time, his thoughts truly began to fracture. He heard voices that didn't belong to this world, a cacophony of mad, chaotic whispers. He felt the gaze and the call of an unnameable thing. And Nyarlathotep was merely observing him. She stared at him, her expression a mix of surprise and confusion, her curiosity reaching its peak. How come even I can't see you clearly? How interesting. This is truly, truly interesting." The psychic probe finally ended. As the pressure vanished, Leo's body went limp, and he collapsed onto the cold rooftop with Ophelia. Gritting his teeth, Leo struggled to lift his head. He was horrified to see her figure was fading, her entire body dissolving before his eyes. "Talk to you later, my interesting little human." She waved at him with a wicked smile. "I'll remember you. I'll look forward to seeing if your next performance can satisfy me." With those final words, Nyarlathotep's form vanished completely. Clutching the unconscious Ophelia, Leo finally gave in to exhaustion and collapsed, unable to find the strength to stand. As his thoughts turned to mush, he vaguely heard Helena's and Evelyn's voices. "Leo, Leo," then a flurry of chaotic noise as people surrounded him. He thought he heard Carolyn's voice and Captain Raymond's. Leo slowly closed his eyes and slipped into unconsciousness. Chapter 2. The Wigner Terror Incident Mission Complete. Chapter ended. Distributing mission rewards. Please stand by. New chapter updating. When he woke up again, Leo found himself lying in a large, soft bed. Sunlight filtered through unfamiliar white curtains, casting a gentle warmth on his face. He pushed back the covers and sat up with some difficulty. His head was still foggy and ached. He squinted, trying to make out his surroundings. He was in a lavishly decorated, magnificent room. Looking out the window, he could see a large, manicured garden and other palatial buildings in the distance. As soon as he was awake, a maid hurried over. "Mr. Leo, you're finally awake. I'll inform Her Highness right away." Leo recognized the young maid. It was Susan, the cook from the estate. Seeing one of Ophelia's staff, he immediately knew where he was, the royal palace in the administrative district. This had to be Ophelia's residence. Once he was awake, the maids bustled about, seemingly preparing breakfast. Leo took a glass of warm water from Susan. It helped clear his head. "How did I get here? Where's Ophelia?" he asked. "And how long was I out?" Susan smiled and explained. 2 days had passed since the battle in downtown. He and Ophelia had been found unconscious on a rooftop, both showing classic symptoms of supernatural backlash. Given the presence of the fifth princess, they were brought directly to the administrative district, where the most skilled royal physicians were located. 2 days already? No wonder I'm starving, Leo muttered. The young cook immediately called out to the staff outside, and soon, A spread of nourishing, restorative dishes was laid out before him. Leo didn't stand on ceremony and dug in. As he ate, he asked, "So, where's Ophelia?" "Her Highness." Susan's face suddenly turned a strange shade of red. Leo looked at her, confused. What was she blushing about? "Her Highness is taking a bath. She'll be back shortly." "A bath?" Leo glanced out the window. This early in the morning? Isn't she worried about catching a cold? Susan lowered her head shyly and said nothing more. Leo watched her puzzled. After eating, he got up and walked around the large room, doing a set of stretches to get his body moving again. Then he opened the mission panel. It showed the mission was complete, which surprised him. He had fully expected to die at least 2 more times after encountering that outer god. He was both relieved and worried. The relief came from the rewards. Rewards distributed 1. Plus 20 to any attribute of your choice 2. Random low-tier skill reward, plus 13. Random mid-tier item reward, plus 14. Fixed high-tier item reward, plus 1. The rewards for this chapter were incredibly generous. A fair compensation for all the dying and struggling he'd done. The worry, however, he had planned to intentionally reload his save, go back, and kill the mastermind, Raoul, as quickly as possible. The goal was to avoid any contact with that malicious outer god, Nyarlathotep. But he never expected the system to just declare the mission complete, which meant he was still on her radar. Damn it, just thinking about that detestable entity made Leo's blood boil. When he recalled her final words and the wicked grin on her face as she said them, a wave of irritation washed over him. She said she'd remember me, and that she's looking forward to my next performance. So what does she want? To play with me? Drive me insane? That she can admire her handiwork before moving on to her next toy? What a goddamn troll. Leo sighed, sitting on the edge of the large bed. Just dealing with the heroines from the first playthrough was troublesome enough. Now he had to contend with a terrifying being who was infinitely more difficult to handle. He'd spent the last few weeks dying over and over, caught between fighting with them and fighting for them, saving the city, spinning like a top. He'd even lost weight. He had finally regained some of his strength. Not yet back to his first playthrough levels, but enough to protect himself. And now, the game had just slammed him with a cliff-like difficulty spike. It just didn't want him to have a moment's peace. Muttering to himself, he opened the rewards notification. When he saw what he'd received, especially the 4th item, his mood finally improved. Maybe this damn game had a conscience after all. The first reward was plus 20 attribute points. He decided to save them for now, since some skills had attribute prerequisites. The second reward was low-tier skill reward bar Titsu, mixed martial arts level, proficient, a practical and respectable art of self-defense. As a refined gentleman in a suit, how can one lack an elegant cane with which to crack the skulls of ruffians? Leo chuckled at the description. It was better than nothing, and it could definitely be useful. While his bloodkin abilities meant he wouldn't be bullied by street thugs or gangsters, using supernatural powers openly in New Haven would attract unnecessary trouble. This rather elegant-sounding fighting style could come in handy. The third reward was a book with an incredibly long title, and it sounded impressive. Mid-tier item reward Gould's Grimoire, a foundational treatise on Ethereum crystals and runic magic, a magic book. It seemed to be about the fundamental principles of certain type of magic. What surprised him even more was the author's name, which was famous throughout the city of Steam, and indeed the entire empire. Rudolph Gould. He was the first president of Blackwood Academy and a renowned scientist of the Royal Society. It was Gould who first figured out how to use the miraculous mineral, Ethereum crystal, and harnessed its magical energy to create a new type of steam engine. This engine had incredibly low energy consumption, providing a virtually endless source of power and kicking off the revolutionary Magitech Industrial Revolution. Leo had always pictured the old president as a typical scientist. The university's official histories described him that way, and his statue depicted a kind, bespectacled old man. He never would have guessed the man was actually a magician. The contrast was fascinating. Maybe after class, the old president would put down his lesson plans and textbooks, grab his staff, and go clear out the dark alleys of anomalies plaguing the city, maybe even fight the minions of an outer god for a few rounds. But as exciting as learning magic was, it paled in comparison to the final reward. High-tier item reward the Elder sign has a deterrent effect on mythological creatures, and under certain circumstances, may even repel mythological creatures and outer gods. Note: investigators should use with extreme caution. The Elder sign cannot truly harm outer gods. They simply dislike it. To them, it might be the equivalent of a pile of crap. LOL. Leo couldn't help but laugh at the last part of the description. Outer gods had things they strongly disliked. The pile of crap analogy was abstract. But regardless, if it could make an outer god uncomfortable, he was thrilled. Leo eagerly redeemed the piece of, well, the elder sign. A stone bearing a twisted, five-pointed star materialized in his palm. In its center was a symbol resembling both an eye and a pillar of fire. The elder sign wasn't large or heavy, and holding it, he felt no mysterious power radiating from it. And of course, it didn't smell bad. In his eyes, it was definitely not as disgusting as a pile of crap. The game's descriptions were never wrong. If this thing could really deter an outer god, it was a life-saving talisman for him right now. He carefully tucked it into his pocket, planning to keep it on him at all times. It seemed his bleeding and fighting for the city hadn't been in vain. High risk meant high reward. Looking at the generous prizes, Leo's mood improved considerably. What are you smiling about? You look so happy. Just then, Ophelia, fresh from her bath, walked over. Leo looked up at her. She was drying her damp hair as she sat down in a chair, a cloud of warm steam rising from her. Her cheeks were flushed from the bath, and as she sat there looking at him, her brows softened into a smile. Her usually cool, stunning face held an unusually charming and bewitching beauty. "I am happy. Found a real treasure," Leo said, not bothering to hide it. He'd have to use these items eventually anyway. He smiled and walked over to her. Coming up behind her, Leo naturally took the towel from her hands and began to gently dry her hair. Ophelia closed her eyes, enjoying his service. "What treasure did you find? Tell me so I can be happy too." "I'll tell you later." Ophelia's eyes snapped open. She turned with a huff and snatched the towel back. "You never tell me anything." "Nothing at all." She pouted, seemingly angry, and went back to drying her own hair. "What do you mean, I don't tell you anything?" Leo feigned innocence, blinking. "You know what I mean." Ophelia spun around to face him, poking him in the chest. "You slept for 2 days. Now that you're finally awake, isn't there anything you want to tell me?" "Tell you." Leo frowned, thinking for a moment, then looked at her with a serious expression. "Yeah, there is." Ophelia's face lit up with anticipation. Leo smiled. "Your bed is really nice. Very comfortable. And the breakfast Susan and the others made was delicious, though a bit too sweet. Remind her to use less sugar next time." "Leo." Ophelia glared at him, exasperated. "You know what I want to ask? Don't think you can fool me like you do your silly little sister." Leo gave a helpless smile. It was impossible to deceive Ophelia. She knew him too well, and Leo knew her just as well. He knew what she was asking. Her serious demeanor meant she wanted to know what happened on that rooftop before they both passed out. Something that could push him to the brink of a psychic backlash was highly unusual. As someone who had been contained herself, she knew how strong his will, his sanity, was. Something extraordinary must have occurred. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke slowly. "I saw the mastermind. Or rather, the real mastermind." "The mastermind?" Ophelia's brow furrowed in confusion. "Isn't the mastermind that confidant of the third prince, Raoul? Didn't Director Fredericks kill him? When you say the real mastermind, do you mean there was someone else behind Raoul?" Leo nodded. "The whole thing was started by Raoul wanting to summon an outer god, but you have to understand, in the grand scheme of things, he was just a pawn." Ophelia gasped, her hand tightening on Leo's. "You saw the being he was trying to summon? You saw an outer god?" Leo looked at her gravely and nodded again. "Who was it? Which entity?" Ophelia pressed. Leo shook his head firmly. "I can't say. I can't tell you. If you know its name, you'll be in trouble too. In many cases, simply knowing the name of an outer god, even thinking it, could have unforeseen consequences. Countless investigators, professors, historians, occultists have been driven to madness that way. When facing such terrifying beings, the only thing a human could do was minimize their own presence, to not give in to misplaced curiosity. He just wanted her to understand the gravity of the situation, not to bring disaster upon her. "Leo." Ophelia was still sulking, her gaze a mixture of dissatisfaction and resentment. "Can't we bear this kind of thing together? Don't you trust me?" Leo shook his head again. "It's not that I don't trust you. How can I not trust you?" "Then tell me." Her tone was almost a command. Leo just looked at her silently, saying nothing more. Their eyes met, and they held the gaze for a long moment. Finally, Ophelia sighed in frustration. "It's because I'm useless. If I were like the great god Nodens, I wouldn't be afraid of these disgusting creatures." Seeing her frustration, Leo thought she had come to her senses and smiled in relief. But he didn't expect her expression to remain stern. She crossed her arms and shot him a cold glare. "I don't care what you think. You won't tell me, so now I'm angry. And so, you have to comfort me. Otherwise, I'm not done with you. Leo let out a short laugh and placed his hands on her soft shoulders. How should I comfort you? A shoulder rub? A shoulder rub isn't enough. She raised an eyebrow, swiveling her entire chair around. From beneath her large, white bathrobe, a pair of beautiful, bare feet emerged, extending toward Leo's face. Leo stared at the immaculate feet so close to him and blinked. A foot rub. Ophelia nodded, her face deadpan. Do a good job, and there's a reward. Do a bad job. She narrowed her eyes dangerously. And there's a punishment. A big one. Seeing Leo stare at her feet, his body frozen, Ophelia thought it must be a demeaning act for him, for any man. She even wondered if she'd gone too far. If he really didn't like it, she'd stop teasing and switch to a milder form of punishment. But she didn't expect what happened next. Leo's eyes lit up, a fervent heat in his gaze. He seized her foot with what could only be described as ecstatic glee. Ah, caught off guard, Ophelia let out a soft cry. It tickles. What is he doing? Leo had no other thoughts in his head. His eyes were intensely focused on the treasure in his hands, massaging it gently, again and again. His gaze grew bolder, traveling upward, from her delicate, playful toes to her pale, exquisite ankle, and further up to the long, slender calf, like a tender lotus root tinged with a faint cherry blossom pink, and then to the firm, shapely thigh with its graceful curve. Leo, the master masseur, inspected his work with righteous dedication. Beneath the loose white bathrobe, the equally white, pristine territory was tantalizingly visible. The whole scene was enough to make one's blood boil. This wasn't a punishment. This was clearly a reward. Leo, Ophelia was starting to panic. She never realized before that Leo was so perverted. What was so interesting about a foot? Ophelia tried to pull her foot back with an indignant huff, but it was no use. This guy. She was regretting her decision and was about to scold him when, crash. The sound of shattering glass came from the doorway. Ophelia's gaze shifted to the side. The maid, Susan, stood frozen in place, her mouth agape, her entire face as red as a ripe apple. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Your Highness, please continue. I'll leave right now. I won't disturb you. She bowed her head in a panic and fled the room, practically tripping over herself. She even remembered to thoughtfully close the door behind her. Ophelia wore an expression of helpless resignation. Throughout the entire incident, Leo hadn't even glanced in Susan's direction. He was too focused, too absorbed to notice anything else. My technique's not bad. Huh, he said, looking up with a grin at the blushing Ophelia, the pressure from his hands increasing with each stroke. Wait. It felt good, admittedly, but this couldn't continue. With an effort she didn't know she possessed, Ophelia finally yanked her foot free. She stared at Leo, flushed and furious. When she saw his smug grin, her anger flared anew. Not only had it failed as a punishment, but he was enjoying it this much? That wouldn't do. Ophelia pinched the flesh at Leo's waist, making him yelp in pain. Hey, you're not satisfied with such a great master? Is that any way to treat a respected therapeutic professional? Ophelia snorted. You're unbelievable. Is your skin as thick as the old capital's walls? Shameless and lewd. She put on a serious, stern face, but the twitching at the corners of her mouth, fighting a smile, betrayed her true feelings. If my skin wasn't thick, how could I ever win you over? Leo shot back with a smirk. Isn't that right, my dear fifth princess? Ophelia scoffed. You're so silly. What's so interesting about feet? Idiot. Leo shook his head with utmost seriousness. You don't understand. With that, he went back to studying her foot, as focused as if he were conducting profound academic research. Ophelia rolled her eyes, speechless. Then, she looked at Leo again. Had enough of a look? Not yet. A slight curve appeared on Ophelia's lips. Really? Because next, there's something even better to see. Leo's head shot up. Something better? Leo was about to ask teasingly what could possibly be better when Ophelia quietly drew the curtains. As he watched in silence, she sat on the large bed with a smile and patted the space beside her. You have to come closer to see clearly. She leaned back on the soft mattress, crossing her right leg over her left in an elegant pose. Her light-colored eyes sized up the dumbfounded Leo, a mischievous glint in them. In the dimly lit room, Leo stared into those enticing eyes, his breathing quickening. No wonder he'd woken up here, in her private chambers, instead of a hospital or his own apartment. Now he knew why she'd been taking a bath so early in the morning. She'd been waiting for him. Had the day she would finally deliver her gift arrived? Leo accepted the invitation and walked forward. As she arranged her still damp, silvery white hair, a pleasant, fresh scent filled the air around him. He stopped. Well, in that case. He turned around. I'll go take a bath too. But Ophelia grabbed his arm, stopping him. Leo smiled down at her. I've been asleep for 2 whole days without a shower. Aren't you worried I stink? Ophelia just stared at him with a knowing smile, her grip not loosening in the slightest. You know how much I value cleanliness. That's why I've been giving you a sponge bath every day. Leo froze, then subconsciously sniffed himself. It all made sense. No wonder he didn't smell strange after 2 days of sleep. In fact, he smelled quite nice. Wait, a realization dawned on him. He looked at her light eyes in surprise. I thought the maids were doing it. It was you, which means she had seen every inch of him, including. Ophelia nodded, her gaze traveling down from his face. Lower and lower. Very nice, she said, her eyes stopping at a certain spot. She nodded again, giving an affirmative evaluation. Ah, you little devil. Her suggestive gaze was like that of a siren luring a man to his doom. How could he possibly resist? With a small cry of surprise, her playful, superior demeanor suddenly changed. Leo had pushed her down onto the bed. He then gently undid the only 2 buttons on her bathrobe. Her dazzling, silvery white hair spread out like a fan. As the beautiful scene unfolded before him, both of their breathing grew ragged. But her hair was so long, so mischievous, it half concealed the very thing he was trying to explore. Is it beautiful? She asked, her voice tight with nervousness. I can't see clearly yet, Leo said. Then come closer. Leo gently pushed aside the playful strands of silver hair, his fingers brushing against her skin. Ophelia's body trembled violently, a suspicious blush spreading rapidly across her pale skin. Can you see clearly now? She asked nervously. Leo nodded. I can't. Sometimes. One had to marvel at the creator's genius. Every part that made up Ophelia was breathtakingly beautiful. Not a single flaw. Everything was as perfect as a dream. It made Leo feel that doing anything to such a sacred work of art would be a kind of blasphemy. But he wasn't a good man. He enjoyed blasphemy, and he reveled in destruction. He would craft an artwork that belonged only to him. Feeling his gaze darken, his grip on her wrists tightening like a predator's, her eyes grew more and more flustered. How much longer are you going to look? I could look forever and never have enough. Leo's voice was hoarse. Ophelia didn't dare meet his scorching, exploratory gaze. She turned her face away, burying it in a pillow, her voice muffled. Then I'll let you look every day. In that case, you'll eventually get tired of looking, right? How could I? Leo suddenly laughed. I'll never get tired of looking. He watched her with amusement, suddenly realizing she wasn't as composed as she pretended to be. She had seemed so eager, teasing and tempting him, as if she had everything under control. But he hadn't even done anything yet, and she was already this scared. Leo. Her muffled voice carried a tremor of fear. I'm scared. Her 4th sister had secretly told her once that the first time was very uncomfortable. Looking at her, so shy and nervous, Leo's grip on her wrists loosened slightly. He smiled gently. I'll be gentle. That only made Ophelia more nervous. Just gentle? She looked at Leo's movements in alarm. And then, Leo. Scene fades to black. When Leo opened the curtains, a sliver of bright moonlight streamed in from above. The magnificent palace stood at the highest point in the city. Looking down, New Haven was a sea of lights. The bustling city of steam seemed as though it would never sleep. The cool moonlight cast a faint glow over the room, filling the once opulent chamber with a rare sense of tranquility. Leo, Ophelia murmured, lifting her head. She didn't know how long she'd slept. She felt groggy and dazed. She clutched the messy blankets, her voice distant. I'm hungry. If you're hungry, you should eat. Leo smiled and walked back to her side, about to call for the servants outside. Wait. Ophelia was suddenly wide awake. She glanced at the disarray on the bed, then quickly toward the wardrobe. I'm going to take a bath, and then change. She couldn't let Susan and Carolyn see her like this. If they did, how could she ever maintain her image in front of her subordinates? At the thought, she shot Leo an indignant glare. This is all your fault. Where did he get all that energy? How could he go on for so long? Was he even human? It was almost dark outside, and she had so much work to do. Ophelia huffily tried to get up, but her limbs were weak and trembling. She stumbled, failing to stand. Leo quickly caught her arm, preventing her from falling back onto the bed. "Oomph." Ophelia looked at Leo with even more resentment, tried to pull her arm away, but she found she didn't even have the strength for that. "It's all your fault." Leo blinked innocently. "What's my fault? You're just hungry because you missed lunch and dinner." Ophelia rolled her eyes. "I don't care. It's your fault. All of it." All right, it's my fault." A smile played on Leo's lips as he lifted the weak woman into his arms. She was as light as paper, barely weighing anything. He held her, a hint of concern in his voice. "You should eat something first. I'll go get you some food." "No need." Ophelia buried her face in his chest, her voice soft. "There's a banquet later tonight." "A banquet?" Leo looked at her curiously. Ophelia lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. "You have to go with me. My father has summoned us both." Leo was surprised. Both of us. It was normal for the old king to summon his daughter. But why him? Sensing his confusion, Ophelia muttered. "He said to bring you along as soon as you woke up. I don't know what he wants with you. It doesn't sound like anything good." With the power and authority she commanded, she could handle most things easily. But when it came to her father, the supreme ruler of the empire, things became uncertain, beyond her control. She hated that feeling, and she hated pulling Leo into these matters even more. "Then we'll go," Leo said calmly. He was already here. It wasn't like he had a choice. "Right. There's nothing to be nervous about. Just try not to say much when the time comes." Ophelia seemed to steel herself, as if preparing for a dangerous battle. Then, she glanced toward the bathroom. "Take me to bathe and dress." Leo smiled. "As you wish, Your Highness." A moment later, "Leo, what are you doing in here?" "I need to take a bath." "Oh, what a coincidence." "Me too." In the magnificent chamber, Leo sat in a chair, idly flipping through a thick book while waiting for Ophelia to finish her bath. The faint sound of running water drifted from the distant bathroom. It felt like she'd spent the entire day doing just that one thing. Leo's wish to join her had been denied. Ophelia had accused him of being too handsy and getting in the way, so she'd kicked him out. That left him with the spare time to read Gould's Grimoire, a foundational treatise on Ethereum crystals and runic magic. The title was accurate. It was indeed a text on the fundamental principles of a type of magic, so fundamental that large sections were dedicated to explaining how Ethereum crystals stored the mysterious energy called magic, and how Master Gould had refined the natural mineral into the stable, reusable, standardized crystals common in New Haven today. The book was more formal than an academic paper, and Leo found it a tough read. The latter half delved into the secrets of a so-called runic magic, filled with an overwhelming number of intimidating formulas, incantations, and symbols. Without a proper foundation, Leo felt like he was reading gibberish. He decided to study the runic magic section later. Professor Evelyn would surely know more about it than he did. She might even be a practitioner herself. After all, she was incredibly knowledgeable and had been alive for who knows how long. While the end of the book was dense, the beginning was quite interesting. Master Gould had included many anecdotes and reflections from his years of travel. One entry detailed how he began his research into Ethereum crystals. Contrary to what most people believed, the crystals weren't his original invention. He had seen similar magical artifacts in an organization called the Order of Magical Arcanists, which inspired him. Only after tireless research did he develop the standard Ethereum crystals of today. Leo had heard of the Order of Magical Arcanists before. He'd even had some dealings with them in the first playthrough. It was a dark wizard organization officially banned from operating within the Empire. The Order of the Holy Edict had branded them heretics and blasphemers who spread plague and panic, launching several purges to exterminate them. The reason Leo knew this so well was that one of its members had been a heroine in one of the chapters of his first playthrough. As he was lost in thought, Ophelia walked over, a resentful look in her eyes. "I'm done. Your turn." Leo silently put down the grimoire. Seeing him move at a leisurely pace, Ophelia urged him on. "Hurry up. We still have to get dressed. I don't want to be the last to arrive at the banquet. It would make me look arrogant and entitled." I know. Leo's faint laughter echoed from a distance. When he returned from his bath, the maids were tidying the room. Several gowns were laid out in the center of the chamber. Ophelia had already chosen one, and Carolyn was tightening her corset. "Leo, does this one look nice?" Ophelia asked, her eyes searching his for approval. His gaze settled on her. Of course it's beautiful. She was wearing an incredibly complex evening gown, primarily cream-colored with dark green accents. It had a voluminous skirt with intricate pleats supported by a bustle in the back. The dress was so elaborate that it took 3 or 4 maids to help her put it on. "Is it really?" Ophelia hesitated, her eyes drifting to another gown, a black and red one. but I think that one is prettier, and it's my favorite color. I'd definitely look much more beautiful in that one, wouldn't I? The head maid, Carolyn, who was styling her hair, smiled. But your highness, that dress is too striking, too aggressive. It's best to be understated at a banquet. Isn't that what you always say? Oh, right. Ophelia's eyes fell, still looking uncertain. Carolyn observed her princess with quiet surprise. In the past, she had never cared about whether her clothes were beautiful or not. Carolyn had always made those decisions for her. So, she glanced at Leo, who was also being helped into his formal wear by the maids. That had to be the reason. Her highness didn't want to compete with the other noble women. She simply wanted to be beautiful for the man she loved. Carolyn sighed internally. The princess had really changed. She was no longer so sharp and cold. She had become more like a young woman in love, prone to such sentimental thoughts. With so many enemies, she wondered if this change was for the best. Ophelia's attire was almost complete, save for her jewelry. Leo dismissed the maids and personally fastened her necklace. When he was done, she smiled at him, lifted her skirt, and twirled playfully like a butterfly. Beautiful. A flash of stunned admiration filled Leo's eyes. Stunning. Ophelia's figure was already exquisite, and the gown's corset cinched her waist to a handspan, perfectly accentuating the curve of her chest. With just a touch of makeup, her face was so flawlessly beautiful it was otherworldly. Paired with the pure, dignified style of the dress, when she smiled softly, she looked like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. No words were needed. Leo's expression was all the satisfaction Ophelia needed, and the corners of her lips curved upwards. She glanced again at the red and black gown, wondering what look of awe he might have worn if she put that one on, wondering if he would have been completely captivated by that version of her. Leo knew she was a little disappointed about the dress. He smiled into her light-colored eyes. It is your presence that gives beauty to the dress, not the dress that makes you more beautiful. He extended his hand in the classic gesture of a gentleman inviting a lady to dance. I think this one suits you perfectly. I don't think I've ever seen you like this before. Shall we? Leo was telling the truth. The most beautiful clothes needed a person to give them soul. To put it simply, Ophelia was so gorgeous she would look good in a burlap sack. Besides, the woman before him now was dignified, pure, and soft. The makeup Carolyn had artfully applied had smoothed away all her sharp edges. For a moment, Leo couldn't see the obsessive, arrogant Ophelia he knew. He was used to her queenly demeanor. This princess version was a refreshing change of pace. You smooth talker. Ophelia's smile was radiant. She grabbed his hand, pulling him closer in a decidedly unladylike manner. Why are the words that come out of your mouth always so pleasant? Always exactly what I want to hear. Leo was about to reply when a pale finger pressed against his lips. Ophelia feigned a thoughtful expression. From the very first time we met, your opening line was so special. Otherwise, I never would have risked everything to escape with you. Thinking back, her light eyes gazed unblinkingly at him. It was all premeditated from the start, wasn't it? Ophelia? Leo's expression turned puzzled. Why bring this up now? She must have known for a long time, but they had always tacitly avoided piercing that veil. He didn't expect her to bring it up now. Leo's lips parted, but Ophelia silenced him again. Don't explain. I know what you're thinking, and I'm not angry about it. A faint smile played on her lips. If he hadn't secretly approached her back then, hadn't deceived her, she probably would have spent the rest of her life in loneliness. She didn't even dare to imagine it. The thought was too terrifying. As she considered this, her smile faded, replaced by a deliberately angry and jealous expression. You're always so good with words. Do you say these things to other women too? Ophelia watched as Leo's expression became a mask of strained composure and had to suppress a laugh. He knew she could read his expressions, and now he was too scared to even speak because anything he said would be a lie. Ophelia tightened her grip on his hand, and taking advantage of his sudden distraction, she slipped a ring onto his finger. Huh? What are you doing? What is this? Seeing Leo's surprised and confused look, Ophelia explained. You can think of this as a talisman. It was crafted by a student of Master Gould's and is imbued with powerful magic. It might save your life when you're in danger. Really? Leo tried to move the mysterious ring now on the middle finger of his right hand. He found he couldn't take it off. Not only could he not remove it, but no matter how he twisted it, the ring didn't budge, as if it had grown into his very skin. Ophelia? He was starting to get angry. So all that sentimental talk was just a setup for this. She'd even tried to use his own guilt against him. So devious. It's very handsome. Don't you like it? Ophelia blinked innocently. This isn't about whether it's handsome or not. Leo realized something and stared at her intently. This thing isn't just a talisman, is it? Tell me, does this ring have some other function? Hearing this, Ophelia finally broke into a triumphant smile. She nodded and held out her own left hand. Leo was shocked to see she wore an identical ring. The ring isn't just a talisman, she explained with a grin. It has another magical property. It can sense if you're in danger. If you are, an image of me will appear by your side. No matter where you are, we can communicate remotely. I can even briefly interfere with your surroundings to help you out of trouble. In danger, Leo thought about it for a moment and immediately realized something was wrong. What do you mean, in danger? You just want to monitor me, don't you? He asked, looking at her speechlessly. Ophelia's face instantly turned cold. This isn't monitoring. It's for your own good. She poked his chest, as if she wanted to stab the ungrateful man. You already have me. What if you disappear again? Am I supposed to go through the last 4 years all over again? If something happens to you this time, I'll truly be a widow. And, she added fiercely, you're always so secretive, acting like you're on some grand mission. Now that this chaos in New Haven is over, you're planning to leave again, aren't you? Leo looked at her helplessly. She was right. He didn't know where the next mission would be, but wherever it was, he would have to say goodbye to her eventually. So, Ophelia leaned in close to his ear, her voice a sinister, murderous whisper. Following the order of me and Helena, you're supposed to go find that woman next. But I don't care what you're thinking. I don't want to see her. I hate that witch. I hate her so much I want to kill her. Understand? Seeing Ophelia's agitated, murderous expression, Leo quickly tried to placate her. Who said I'm going to see her? I never said that. That witch was always on the move, roaming the world. Finding her wouldn't be easy. Besides, Chapter 2 had just ended, and Chapter 3 hadn't even appeared yet. Nothing was set in stone. Why was she so certain the next mission involved the witch? Ophelia watched Leo's hurried explanation, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Really? Leo felt a scrutinizing gaze wash over him, the pressure mounting. It was hardly less intense than being stared down by an outer god. He wiped all emotion from his face and nodded with a serious expression. Really? Ophelia stared into his eyes without moving. Leo's expression was flawless. After a long moment, Ophelia's features finally softened. He wasn't lying. She nodded to herself. But, she asked sternly, do you think about her? Does she have a place in your heart? Leo shook his head decisively. No, corruption +5. Ophelia asked again, who do you think is stronger, her or me? Leo answered without hesitation. You are. Corruption +5. If she was in danger and needed you to save her, would you go? No. Corruption +5. The fatal trifecta. His corruption level skyrocketed. Leo could only sigh internally. A woman who could read expressions was terrifying. No matter what he did or said, it was like being naked in front of her. He had no privacy at all. Ophelia watched him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Leo's own smile became increasingly awkward. Some of these questions, she was asking things she already knew the answers to. The witch was powerful. Ridiculously so. She was arguably the single most indispensable character from the first playthrough. With her in the party, Leo felt he wouldn't even be that nervous facing an outer god again. They might even stand a chance. Who wasn't a sucker for a powerful character? During the first playthrough, the witch had been the sharpest knife in his arsenal. As a result, all the best gear he'd acquired from fighting monsters, cultists, and exploring ancient ruins had gone to her. What exactly had he given her? He couldn't even remember it all. Countless Ethereum crystals, ancient staves, damage-boosting artifacts, scrolls, orbs, magic books. By the end, he had armed her to the teeth, turning her into a humanoid death machine, a super-powerful spellcaster who could steamroll any level. He couldn't help it. Mages were just that broken. The game balance was terrible. In a world that was supposed to be quasi-modern, a character with magical talent rivaling the archmages of old just made his guns feel like pea shooters. My God, the meta's gone back to medieval times. So to sum it up, the reason Ophelia resented the witch so much probably wasn't jealousy over the gear. With her status, acquiring good equipment wasn't difficult. What she truly cared about was the feeling that that damned evil witch had stolen all of his attention. The memory trip ended. The temperature in the room was dropping, but Leo felt like he was burning up. He silently watched Ophelia's smile grow increasingly terrifying. Even though she could read his micro-expressions and knew he was lying, he had to say it. He had to, because she already knew the truth. She'd had the answers in her heart all along. But she still wanted to ask. Sometimes a woman just wants to see the effort. After a long pause, Ophelia seemed satisfied with Leo's desperate attempt to prove his innocence. Good. I believe you. Her soft hand caressed his cheek. She asked with a light laugh. Look at you. Just a few words, and you're already sweating. Is it too hot in here? Her light eyes were full of playful mischief. Yeah, it is a little warm, Leo said with an awkward smile, trying to change the subject. Didn't you say you didn't want to be late for the banquet? We should get going. Ophelia glanced at him with a mocking smile, then turned to Carolyn. Prepare for our departure. Yes, Your Highness. Leo breathed a silent sigh of relief. Ophelia watched his back, the mockery in her smile deepening. She knew Leo too well, and she certainly knew he was saying those things to keep her from getting angry. But that alone wasn't enough. She had to take action. Ophelia gently stroked the ring on her left hand, her gaze growing more inscrutable. A touching reunion after a long separation? How could it be complete without her? When the time came, it would surely be a uniquely heartwarming scene. Just you wait. The royal carriage made its way toward the banquet hall. The royal palace grounds were so vast that they needed to take a carriage just to get to their destination. Inside, Ophelia was carefully tying Leo's cravat. The formal suit he wore wasn't as flashy as the ladies' gowns, just a shirt, waistcoat, and tailcoat, mostly in muted colors. But the tailored fit highlighted his physique, and combined with his unfairly handsome face, Ophelia's eyes lit up when she finished with the cravat and looked him over. How do I look? Leo smiled at her. Ophelia nodded. Handsome. You truly are my man. Even Carolyn smiled from the side. When Your Highness and Mr. Leo make your entrance, every gentleman and lady in the hall will pale in comparison. There will be no couple more dazzling than you. Ophelia happily linked her arm with Leo's. Carolyn, you get sweeter with your words every day. Carolyn shook her head seriously. Your Highness, I'm speaking the truth. You and Mr. Leo are a perfect match. Ophelia's smile grew even wider, her eyes curving into beautiful crescents. Leo shook his head with a wry smile. The headmaid wasn't just competent, her flattery was also top tier. He remembered that she hadn't been by Ophelia's side 4 years ago. Back then, the headmaid had been that muscle-bound woman. Carolyn had risen through the ranks to become Ophelia's most trusted confidant. Considering her noble background, it made sense. In many ways, Carolyn was better suited to be an advisor or strategist. The carriage slowly came to a stop in the square before the banquet palace. Just then, they heard a commotion from outside. Leo opened the carriage window and looked out. A well-dressed man was shouting agitatedly, surrounded by several royal guards. You blind fools. I'm a member of the Imperial Council. Why won't you let me in? Let me in. I must see His Majesty. Your Majesty, I implore you to repeal the Ethereum Crystal Act. It will bring nothing but harm to the Empire. I'm thinking of the greater good. Your Majesty, you mustn't do this. You're cutting off our livelihood. Your Majesty, hearing the man's shouts, Leo and Ophelia exchange a look. Who is that? He looks familiar, Ophelia said thoughtfully. A minor noble from a declining family. His name is Taylor. He's quite capable himself. He owns a very large mining operation and now serves on the Imperial Council. As Leo's party disembarked, more royal guards converged on the entrance. Many of the other arriving guests were murmuring amongst themselves, their eyes fixed on the scene. Seeing the growing crowd, Taylor became even more agitated, his shouts growing louder. But it was no use. In the end, he was forcibly dragged away by the royal guards, his wails fading into the distance. The ejected councilman and the thing he was protesting piqued both Leo's and Ophelia's curiosity. Both sharp-minded, they sensed something unusual was afoot. This Ethereum Crystal Act, what's that about? Leo asked her. Ophelia looked to Carolyn, who immediately provided an answer. Your Highness, earlier today, the council passed the act, which was pushed through by His Majesty. The details are extensive, but the main point is to impose strict regulations on Ethereum crystals. Regulate Ethereum crystals? Ophelia raised an eyebrow. Precisely. Carolyn glanced around before lowering her voice. According to the act, all Ethereum mines will be nationalized. All private mining licenses will be revoked. Furthermore, every Ethereum crystal circulated on the market will have to be registered, and all Magitech devices, regardless of size, will require strict approval. I see. Leo glanced back in the direction Taylor had been dragged. No wonder the mine owner was so upset. If this act was truly implemented, it was tantamount to seizing his entire fortune. Ophelia frowned, looking at Carolyn with displeasure. Carolyn, why wasn't I informed of something so important sooner? Carolyn opened her mouth, looked from Ophelia to Leo, and then faltered. Your Highness, this morning, you and Mr. Leo were busy. It wasn't convenient for me to inform you. Seeing Carolyn stammer, Ophelia felt a flash of irritation. Then almost instantly, she realized what she and Leo had been doing that morning. The memory of their passionate encounter flooded her mind, and her face flushed bright red. She covered her face, taking a long moment to push the images away. Ophelia shot a glare at Leo, both embarrassed and annoyed. This is all your fault. Huh? Leo pointed at himself, blinking. How is this his fault? Wasn't she the one who wanted to give him a gift? In the end, he just sighed and nodded. All right, it's all my fault. He got in the better end of the deal, so a little groveling was fine. Leo put on a stern expression and gestured for Carolyn to continue. Once Carolyn had shared all the information she had, Ophelia had composed herself. She picked up on some strange details. This whole thing. How did I not hear a single whisper about it? My father kept this under wraps remarkably well. And how could an act with such massive implications pass so easily? She could already imagine the enormous waves it would create in New Haven once implemented. Seizing wealth from the merchant class was as good as killing them. Protests like the one at the palace gates would be the least of their worries. Leo nodded in agreement. It was strange. A large portion of the Imperial Council consisted of the new rich who had made their fortunes from the magitech industry. An act that cut into their profits should have been incredibly difficult to pass. But Carolyn shook her head. Merchants are short-sighted. His Majesty promised them that once the market is unified and prices are set by the state, the cost of raw materials will drop significantly, drastically reducing their factories' operating costs. They certainly are short-sighted, Ophelia said with a mocking smile. After all, the only ones losing out are mine owners like Taylor, and there aren't many of them in the country. A few smugglers will also be hit, but the vast majority of factory owners will continue to make money, perhaps even more than before. Leo suddenly spoke up. There's another reason it passed so smoothly. Both women looked at him. Leo analyzed. Your father has been planning this for a long time. Announcing the act at this specific moment leaves almost no room for opposition. Mr. Leo is absolutely right, Carolyn said, giving him an appreciative look. The bombing and the cultist incident have thrown the entire country into a panic. Public sentiment is at a boiling point. Ever since people became afraid to ride in magitech vehicles, public horse-drawn carriages have become popular again, and the price of bicycles has soared. Therefore, she concluded, public opinion is on His Majesty's side. In the council, the old nobility certainly stands with him. As for the merchants, they're not even unified among themselves. Some are even looking to capitalize on the situation. The opposition can't make a single wave. After Carolyn finished, Leo and Ophelia exchanged another look, their eyes equally deep. Both were stunned by the Emperor's methods. By seizing control of Ethereum crystals, he had seized control of the entire magitech industry. Whether the merchants got rich or went bankrupt now depended entirely on the king's whim. But the old king's move wasn't about greed. His goal was singular: power. Leo looked toward the towering palace, now much closer, and his perception of the dying old king shifted. Rumors in the capital claimed he was incompetent, that he'd ignored state affairs for over a decade, surrounding himself with wizards trying to extend his life, allowing his children to fight amongst themselves and the Imperial Council to devolve into daily brawls. But this incident proved he was anything but incompetent. Quite the opposite. He was like an old, rusted sword with a hidden edge. It might look tarnished, but once drawn, it would strike a fatal blow. My father. Ophelia looked at Leo, not finishing her sentence, just offering a bitter smile. She lowered her head, seemingly overcome by a profound sense of powerlessness. Leo knew she had come to the same conclusion he had. The bombing, the countless dead civilians, the evil cultists. What role had the king played in all of this? Did he not know that an outer god had nearly been summoned? Did he not care about the lives of everyone in the city? Leo felt Ophelia's hand turn cold in his. She whispered, "Now you see why I long for the sky so much." Seeing her so dejected, Leo squeezed her hand tightly. I know, this family, these siblings, and this father, they had driven her to despair. From a young age, the innocent, romantic Ophelia had never fit in. Even now, embroiled in the game, she despised it all from the bottom of her heart. She hated everything around her. Leo knew he couldn't help much. All he could do was be there for her. Ophelia leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Only then could she feel a rare sense of peace. Maybe it's not what we think, Leo said with a smile, trying to comfort her. What if we're just being conspiracy theorists? Ophelia didn't continue the topic. She just murmured, her voice barely audible. Leo. If, one day, my father wants to kill me, will you risk your life to get me out of here? Leo shook his head. No. Ophelia's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Leo grinned. I'll march into the palace with you, and we'll take the damn throne together. A laugh, like 100 flowers blooming at once, burst from Ophelia's lips. Upon entering the resplendent royal banquet hall with Ophelia, Leo saw that the event was already in full swing. Guests mingled in small groups, glasses clinking, their conversations lively. They were late after all. But Ophelia was the fifth princess. No one would comment on her tardiness. A server politely welcomed them inside. As soon as Ophelia appeared, Leo felt dozens of eyes turn their way. After having been publicly recuperating for so long, she rarely appeared at such events. People were intensely curious about the mysterious, beautiful fifth princess who had recently regained His Majesty's favor. As Leo and Ophelia were chatting quietly, a man with a gentle smile approached them. Leo looked him over. The man was in a military dress uniform, appeared to be in his late 20s, and bore a slight resemblance to Ophelia, though he had the same striking blonde hair as the third prince. From these clues, Leo deduced this must be the second prince, the one who commanded the city guard. Fifth sister, he said, his tone laced with concern. I heard you confronted those cultists and were injured. Are you all right? Ophelia looked at him and offered a faint smile, shaking her head. The palace physicians are always excellent. I've fully recovered. That's good to hear. The second prince sighed in relief. Don't act on your own in situations like this in the future. You'll worry father. Hearing this, Ophelia just smiled again, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Second brother, you overestimate my place in his heart. Fifth sister, the second prince shot her a disapproving look, then glanced around nervously. Father is not as heartless as you make him out to be. Don't say such things again. Ophelia's faint smile remained, as if recalling some past event. I hope you're right. An awkward silence fell between them. The second prince gave a slightly strained laugh and turned his attention to Leo. His eyes held a flicker of curiosity. Fifth sister, won't you introduce me to this young gentleman? Leo offered a polite greeting to the prince and was about to introduce himself when Ophelia took his hand. He is Leo Sterling. That was all she said, with no mention of his background or status. In the face of her seemingly kind and warm brother, Ophelia maintained a distant, polite smile, showing no intention of continuing the conversation. The second prince wasn't offended. He had always known his younger sister's temperament. He sized Leo up with some interest, his gaze finally landing on their clasped hands and the identical rings on their fingers. The second prince's eyes darkened, and a knowing smile spread across his face. Fifth sister, you are even more willful than I imagined. Does father know about this? Ophelia feigned confusion. Know about what? The second prince looked Leo over again, his meaning obvious. He was referring to the major decision of getting engaged without permission. He had been keeping a close eye on his sister since her sudden return to the center of power. Ophelia was cunning and had earned their father's satisfaction with her work. But he never thought she would be so impulsive when it came to something as important as marriage. He wondered how their father would react upon learning the news. Sterling. The second prince mulled over the name, but couldn't recall any Sterling family in New Haven. He was probably just a commoner. The prince's estimation of him dropped even lower. Still, since he was speaking with Ophelia, he couldn't be too blunt. He asked politely, so Mr. Sterling, where are you currently employed? You look rather unfamiliar. Facing his sort of brother-in-law, Leo shrugged candidly. I'm currently a student at Blackwood Academy. I haven't graduated yet. Still a student, I see. The second prince shook his head with a small, dismissive laugh at a loss for words. As the three of them stood there, a hearty laugh cut through the air. Ha, your highness, Mr. Sterling is no ordinary student. The newcomer was none other than the head of the Bureau of Special Investigations, Director Fredericks. Director Fredericks. Both the second prince and Ophelia greeted him with a nod. Leo turned to him as well and saw Fredericks beaming at him. He hadn't expected to see him here. The king was hosting only a small banquet to celebrate his recent recovery and his return to managing state affairs. But given the recent disaster in New Haven, even the royal family couldn't be too ostentatious. The guest list was limited to a few high-ranking nobles, members of the royal family, and his closest confidants. Even so, the second prince treated Director Fredericks, who held a relatively low title, with considerable respect. The P6.I wasn't a major power, but it was indispensable to the city and the empire. After all, No one wanted to get on the wrong side of a team composed entirely of supernaturals. With an old acquaintance present, the awkward tension finally eased. Frederick smiled at Leo and Ophelia. "How are you two recovering? Thank you for your concern. We're both fine now," Ophelia replied with a nod. "Director Fredericks," the second prince began, recalling what he'd said earlier. "You mentioned that this Mr. Sterling." "Oh," Fredericks clapped Leo on the shoulder with a grin. "Your Highness, you may not know this, but Mr. Sterling here rendered distinguished service in the recent cultist case." "Oh, I was not aware of that," the second prince said, his expression turning curious. Fredericks kept his hand on Leo's shoulder, praising him like a favored subordinate. "Without him, I don't know how many of my agents we would have lost. He's a rare young talent. I've tried to recruit him several times, but to no avail." The second prince looked at Leo with surprise. "So Mr. Sterling has such skills? Are you a supernatural, Mr. Sterling?" Leo felt like Fredericks was going to praise him to the moon. He glanced at the man and saw the sly, foxy smile on his face. "Is this old fox trying to recruit me again?" He could only offer a humble smile. "Not all. I'm just a concerned citizen." Besides, he still vividly remembered Frederick's lightning-fast, devastating strike that had finished off that black eel, Raoul. Leo started laying on the flattery himself. Ultimately, it was Director Fredericks who resolved the situation. "I merely provided a small amount of assistance." "Now you're just being modest," Fredericks said cheerfully. "You absolutely must be there for the City Hall commendation ceremony in a few days." "Huh." Leo paused, surprised they were actually giving out awards. "This isn't going to end up in the papers, is it?" He immediately pictured Captain Raymond's smug, punchable grin splashed across the front page after every major case. "I wouldn't know. City Hall is handling the arrangements." Director Fredericks gave him a suspicious look. "Why are you so concerned about it?" "It's a long story. Let's just say keeping a low profile is for the best," Leo said with a helpless smile. "Huh." Ophelia let out a cold laugh. Leo glanced at her silently. "You just don't want anyone to know you're back, do you?" Ophelia saw right through him. He wasn't afraid of his privacy being exposed. He was afraid of a woman showing up on his doorstep, guns blazing, just like she had. Leo's smile became even more sheepish. As the three of them laughed and chatted, they seemed to have forgotten the second prince was still standing beside them. Fredericks, seeing the prince's expression begin to strain after being ignored for so long, smiled graciously. "Your Highness, regarding the case, there are still some confidential details I need to discuss with these two. If you would." The second prince took the hint. He waved a dismissive hand. "You carry on. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you." With that, he turned and walked away. As his back receded into the crowd, Ophelia looked at Leo, a hint of resignation in her smile. "What do you think of my dear brother?" Leo stroked his chin and glanced at Director Fredericks. "Well, His Highness seems quite amiable." "Hardly." Ophelia rolled her eyes, her mind flashing back to her childhood, to the times her second and third brothers teamed up with her fourth sister to bully her. After all these years, that petulant, hot-tempered brat had actually learned how to act. The concern in his eyes when he'd looked at her. If she didn't know any better, she might have actually believed it. At least he didn't show it. "He gave you some face," Leo said with a smile. In that respect, he was a definite improvement over the third prince. Of course, that also meant he was far more cunning. "Even so, Your Highness, it would be best for you to maintain a friendly facade in his presence," Fredericks suddenly advised. "Yes, I know." Ophelia nodded. The thought made her think of her other brother, and she immediately asked about his current situation. "His Majesty has confined the third prince to his quarters. He was furious about the incident and is very disappointed in him," Frederick said, smiling. Leo's expression was one of understanding. No wonder he hadn't seen him at the banquet. Raoul, the man who had plunged the entire city into a state of slaughter and panic, was the third prince's right-hand man. There was no way he could escape responsibility. Even if he wasn't directly aware of the plot, he was far from innocent. Confinement was getting off easy. A scornful smile touched Ophelia's lips. "Huh, at least we'll have some peace and quiet for a while." Leo nodded. This is more than just a dereliction of duty. Appointing a man like that as his confidant shows a complete lack of judgment. It's likely painted him as incompetent in the king's eyes. "Which is a good thing for Her Highness," Fredericks added, making his allegiance clear. As they spoke, a new wave of guests surged forward to greet Leo and Ophelia. This time, Ophelia didn't maintain the cool distance she'd shown her brother. She offered an elegant, graceful smile, handling the pleasantries and small talk with practiced ease. Before long, The crowd of well-wishers around her grew so thick that Leo was practically squeezed out of the circle. He and Ophelia shared a look of helpless amusement. Leo smiled, leaving the important social dance to her. Plucking a cocktail from a passing waiter's tray, he scanned the attendees. The guests had unconsciously split into several factions. The largest group by far was clustered around the second prince, a mix of military brass and high nobility. It seemed that in everyone's eyes, he was the frontrunner for the throne. As he was thinking this, Leo felt a sharp, penetrating gaze from somewhere in the crowd. It sent an icy chill down his spine. He turned instantly and saw her in a corner of the ballroom, alone. Professor Evelyn was staring at him, her expression a mask of pure resentment. Leo blinked, surprised and a little embarrassed to run into her here, of all places. In the shadows untouched by the crystal chandeliers, Evelyn seemed to be killing time by nibbling on pastries. When their eyes met, she set her plate aside and viciously mouthed 2 words at him. Even from a distance, Leo knew exactly what she was saying. "You little bastard." He shook his head with a resigned smile. Glancing back at Ophelia, who was completely swamped, he started walking toward Evelyn's corner. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor. What brings you to the party?" Evelyn shot him a nasty glare. "And why shouldn't I be here? Are you implying my status isn't high enough to warrant an invitation?" Seeing her fuming, Leo quickly tried to smooth her ruffled feathers. "Of course not. You misunderstood me. I would never mean something like that." He flagged down a waiter and had a fresh plate of desserts delivered to her, which seemed to improve her mood slightly. Evelyn shot him a sideways glance. The Abraham family received an invitation, but they insisted that I be the one to attend. "It's infuriating. Why would they insist on you coming?" Leo asked, confused. "Didn't you leave the family?" "It's because of you. It's all your fault." She gave his arm a resentful smack. "How is this my fault now?" Leo felt deeply wronged. Why was everyone always blaming him? What was he, the designated fall guy? "Of course it's because of you." Evelyn snapped. "When I went to save you, I had to contact my family again. I owe them a huge favor now. So today, that scheming, manipulative old man deliberately sent me here. He wants everyone to see that I haven't truly left the family fold. And look at you." She glared at Leo, then shot a glance toward Ophelia, the center of everyone's attention. Her tone turned sour. "Showing up here all lovey-dovey with your old flame. It's been 2 days. Helena and I have been worried sick about you at home." "I only just woke up this morning," Leo mumbled. Seeing the storm clouds gathering in Evelyn's expression, he forced an awkward smile and tried to change the subject. "As compensation, how about I treat you to something good? A grand seafood feast. My signature 5-alarm chili, made with my own 2 hands." Evelyn remained unmoved. Not even the promise of delicious food could placate her. She seemed genuinely furious. "Professor, Professor, Professor." Leo tugged at her sleeve, but no amount of placating could soften the hard set of her face. She just stood there, stony-faced. He studied her more closely, a frown creasing his brow. Why was she this angry today? He muttered to himself, "The way you're acting, it's not because you were forced to come to this banquet, and it's not because I didn't come home right away, is it?" Leo's eyes narrowed. In a setting like this, there was really only one possible reason. He said suddenly, "Professor, don't tell me you're jealous." "What?" Evelyn reacted like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. "I am not jealous. It's not like I'm your anything. Why would I be jealous over you?" After Evelyn's impassioned outburst, Leo glanced around. A few guests were already looking their way with curiosity. "Professor, could you keep it down?" Evelyn realized she had lost her composure and let out a soft huff. "Anyway, I'm not thinking that way at all. I'm just—" She mumbled, her gaze drifting toward the center of the room, where Ophelia stood as the undeniable star of the evening. Even while navigating the highest echelons of the Empire's elite, she moved with an effortless grace, every smile and gesture exuding elegance and nobility. As proud as she was, Evelyn had to admit it. The 5th princess was exceptional. Young, beautiful, cunning, powerful, influential, and much, much richer than her. At that thought, Evelyn's mind became a tangled mess. She stole another glance at Leo beside her, especially after seeing the 2 of them arrive at the banquet hall together, arm in arm. It was as if all the starlight in the night sky had converged upon them. They were dazzling, so dazzling it almost hurt to look. Evelyn didn't know what was wrong with her. Just a moment ago, she'd been seething with resentment for this smirking brat, wanting nothing more than to wring his neck. But why, after seeing them look so intimate, so perfectly matched, did a fire ignite in her chest? What was she so angry about? So what if they were good together? What did that have to do with her? How had she become so irrational? This wasn't like her at all. Frustrated, Evelyn ran a hand through her hair and downed her cocktail in one go. The sharp, fruity taste calmed her nerves slightly. Savoring it for a moment, she decided it wasn't enough, snatched the glass from Leo's hand, and drained that one too. Never had this before. It's actually pretty good. Professor, you should probably slow down, Leo said wearily. She was getting hooked. Don't say I didn't warn you. This stuff has a kick. You'd better not make a scene in the middle of the banquet hall. Evelyn lifted her chin defiantly. Is that what you think of me? That I can't handle myself? She waved over a waiter, took 2 more cocktails from his tray, and looked at Leo with a challenging glint in her eyes. Leo could only sigh in defeat. She handed him one of the glasses, forcing him to drink with her. What could he say? Seeing Professor Evelyn in such a foul mood, all he could do was go along with it. As they ate and drank, Evelyn's gaze once again fell upon the 5th princess mingling with the powerful nobles. She offered a strange, backhanded compliment. Your old flame is quite the operator, isn't she? Leo paused. Evelyn smiled. Before this, everyone thought the succession would be a race between the 2nd and 3rd princes. No one expected the 5th princess to suddenly jump into the fray. She continued, I've heard stories about what she's accomplished. To think that the princess who was raised on the outside, who most people thought was an abandoned child of the king, could rise so quickly in such a short time. Leo's eyes also rested on Ophelia, and he shook his head with a faint smile. She's incredible. I never imagined she'd become like this in 4 years. She is incredible. Evelyn's tone turned acidic. Much more incredible than me. Leo suddenly broke into a brilliant smile. But you're incredible too, Professor. What's so incredible about me? Evelyn laughed self-deprecatingly, muttering under her breath. Not as pretty as her, not as young as her. She's so powerful and influential, and for all we know, she might even... Stop. Leo truly had no idea what had gotten into her today. The 2 of them hadn't even spoken, and she was already feeling so insecure. This wasn't the proud Professor Evelyn he knew. Where had she gone? Then tell me, what good qualities do I have? Compared to her? Evelyn demanded, staring at him. Leo was taken aback. Why did women always have to compare themselves to each other? He could only give her a thorough, appraising look. Evelyn pursed her lips. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a mix of tension and anticipation. Leo's gaze sharpened, finally landing on one particular area. Who says you don't have any good qualities? Professor, yours are the greatest. His eyes were locked on the magnificent, awe-inspiring evil of her chest, and his heart filled with a strange sense of reverence. Leo hereby declared, the professor's chest and Ophelia's legs were both treasures of the highest order. Just as New Haven could not lose its Magitech industry, this game could not lose Professor Evelyn's magnificent bosom. You little brat. Seeing Leo staring unabashedly at her chest, Evelyn broke into a helpless smile. She wasn't angry, though. Instead, she just ruffled his hair playfully. Is that my only good quality? Do I really have to compete with a girl who just came of age over the size of my chest? She pouted and crossed her arms. Of course not. Leo grinned. Professor, you're incredibly knowledgeable, and your teaching is top-notch. You made someone like me, who hates class, actually enjoy learning. You're the best teacher I've ever had. Only then did Evelyn nod in satisfaction, a smile unconsciously gracing her lips. Oh, right. Speaking of which, something else occurred to Leo. Do you know what circle magic is? Circle magic? Evelyn frowned slightly. That's a concept passed down from the ancient Magus Imperium. It's not in common use anymore. How do you know about it? The ancient Magus Imperium? Leo hadn't expected circle magic to be tied to such a hidden piece of history. His curiosity piqued. He quickly told her about the magic book he had found, a work by Master Gould. Evelyn was surprised, but seeing Leo's eager, student-like expression, she just shook her head with a smile and patiently began to explain. In the distant ancient era, many more people could learn magic. Mages had a unique and profound system of cultivation, not like today, where simply being able to recite a full incantation makes you a remarkable spellcaster. Their status was much higher, too. You have to understand, modern terms like wizard and which are mostly derogatory. Leo listened with rapt attention. Evelyn continued. Before the advent of ethereal magic, circle magic was the dominant form of spellcasting. Mages back then didn't need external objects to channel their power. They had internal organs for storing magic, much like the blood core in you and me. So, magical proficiency was measured by the number of circles. A spell circle count referred to how many rings were needed to construct its sigil. The higher the circle count, the more dramatic the resonant power the sigil could command. Evelyn described a few world-shaking, high-circle spells mentioned cryptically in historical texts. Leo's heart pounded with excitement. He wanted to rush home and study Master Gould's book immediately. Finally, her throat dry from talking, Professor Evelyn accepted another cocktail from a waiter, concluding her extracurricular lesson. So, Leo's eyes lit up with anticipation. Does that mean you know how to do it? Evelyn gave him a mysterious wink. What do you think? You have to. You have to teach me. Leo grabbed her arm impatiently. Seeing his earnest plea, the curve of Evelyn's lips widened. See? I'm not completely useless after all. That Ophelia girl definitely doesn't know this, or else why wouldn't he ask her? He still needs me. Leo saw the smug, triumphant look on her face. So proud, she was practically floating, and had to hide a laugh. His arrogant, prideful Professor Evelyn was back. Seeing as you're asking so sincerely, I suppose I could offer a little guidance. She said, drawing it out. But let's be clear. My knowledge is broad, not deep. I can help you with the basics, but the rest of your training will be up to you. Leo nodded eagerly. That was more than enough. He couldn't even begin to decipher the book. It was so baffling it just made him want to sleep. Yet Professor Evelyn had explained the key concepts of circle magic in just a few sentences, as expected of the best professor at Blackwood Academy. As they were talking animatedly, both Leo and Evelyn suddenly noticed a hush fall over the crowd. HM? What's going on? Has the king arrived? Evelyn looked up and saw a beautiful, smiling face slowly approaching them. Leo's head snapped up as well. Ophelia's eyes were fixed on the pair huddled together. After giving Leo a deep, meaningful look, she turned her smiling gaze to Evelyn. Are you two done chatting? She asked, her voice sweet as honey. Can I have it back now? When Ophelia smiled at them, the air seemed to freeze for a moment. Evelyn's mood, which Leo had just managed to improve, soured instantly. She only let us talk for a few minutes, and this woman is already rushing over to stake her claim. And she's supposed to be a princess? So possessive, not the least bit demure. Evelyn crossed her arms, her tone dripping with annoyance. I'm discussing a topic with my student. What is it? Do you need something? Ophelia gave her a baffled look and frowned slightly. I believe that's my line. What? Ophelia didn't bother with her, turning directly to Leo. Have you forgotten why we're here? Leo nodded with a dry smile. I remember. The whole reason they'd come to this banquet was to have an audience with the old king. He glanced past Ophelia and saw a middle-aged man in a court attendant's uniform, waiting with his head bowed. We don't have time for this. Let's go. My father wants to see us now. Ophelia slowly extended a pale, slender hand toward Leo. Like a gentleman, Leo took her hand, then looked back at Evelyn with an apologetic expression. Sorry about this, Professor. I have official business to... Hey! Before he could finish, he was yanked away by a stone-faced Ophelia. Oomph. Once they were out of earshot, Ophelia said coolly, You seem to be quite busy, aren't you? Leaving me all alone to sneak off for a secret rendezvous with your teacher. Leo felt deeply wronged and quickly explained, What rendezvous? I saw you were busy, so I went to ask the professor a few questions. What questions couldn't wait until we got back? Ophelia's expression was full of displeasure. And what kind of question requires her expertise? Leo told her the truth about circle magic. Circle magic? Ophelia fell silent for a moment. It was true. She didn't know anything about it. But she wasn't about to admit that. She scoffed. You could have asked Carolyn. And if Carolyn didn't know, I could have found you the most skilled royal mage in all of New Haven. Leo shook his head helplessly. I didn't want to cause you more trouble. You have so many enemies right now, it wouldn't be a good idea. Huh? Ophelia wasn't listening. Excuses. You just wanted to see your precious teacher. Leo couldn't admit to that, of course, and shook his head vehemently. Really? Ophelia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. But I have to admit, she's quite beautiful. And her figure is impressive. You must really like her type. That is a baseless accusation. Leo continued to shake his head, then declared with perfect solemnity, Anything more than a handful is a waste. I prefer proportions that are just right, much more comfortable to hold. As he spoke, his gaze subconsciously flickered toward Ophelia. You rogue. Ophelia shot him a glare, though she still wasn't ready to let him off the hook. Even if you say that, I still think there's something going on between you two. After all, she continued, I heard from Carolyn and the others. Your Professor Evelyn was willing to brave immense danger just to come to the estate and save you. I also heard it was her idea to have you arrested as a suspect in the bombing. She seems to care about you a great deal. It's perfectly normal for a teacher to care about her student, Leo said with a serious, earnest expression. Professor Evelyn is very responsible. Is she? Ophelia's eyes narrowed. But she lives in your house. A beautiful teacher like that, parading around in front of you all day. Are you telling me you're not the least bit tempted? As she spoke, Leo's mind inexplicably flashed back to an image of the professor at home, wandering around in nothing but an oversized white button-down shirt. The flash of pale thighs, the gentle sway of, "Stop." He looked at Ophelia's smile, which was slowly turning frigid, and adopted the firm expression of a perfect gentleman. You're seriously overthinking this. There's nothing between me and the professor. Liar. There isn't. Still lying. Didn't I tell you that you don't have to kill off the other women? Why are you so nervous? I'm really not lying. Huh. Hey, what are you pinching me for? Ow. As they whispered and bickered, the attendant leading them remained silent, guiding them out of the banquet hall and into a brightly lit corridor. Back in the ballroom, Evelyn, who had been left behind, watched their playful figures disappear into the distance, and let out a nearly inaudible sigh. Then, she silently ordered another cocktail. Led by the middle-aged attendant, Leo and Ophelia navigated the winding corridors of the vast palace, finally arriving at a quiet and stately grand study. In the center of the room hung a half-body portrait of King Charlton II. In the painting, he was clad in armor, his hands resting on the hilt of a great sword, his gaze deep and fixed on the distance. To the side of the portrait were displays of various weapons and the royal crest of the Wigner Empire, a complex emblem combining a black dragon, a sword and shield, and a briar rose. The ruler of the empire himself was standing before a bookshelf, leafing through a volume. When he saw them enter, he turned with a smile. You've arrived. Ophelia looked at her father and gave a slight nod. Yes. Leo placed a hand on his chest and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, no need for formalities. He laughed heartily and set the book down. Leo looked up at him. Though he'd seen an image of the king during his first playthrough, it had been from a distance during a festival. This was the first time he had observed him up close. Charlton Gordian Wigner, known as Charlton II, due to a predecessor of the same name. The king was much older than he appeared in the portrait. His temples were gray, his frame was thin, and he was slightly stooped. At first glance, it was hard to connect this man with the ruler of an empire that dominated the northern continent through magitech, steel, firearms, and trade. But Leo knew better than to underestimate him. He had already witnessed the king's iron fist with the Ethereum Crystal Act, and his role in the cultist incident was difficult to ascertain. This old man, seemingly in his twilight years, was as ruthless as they came. Don't just stand there. Please sit. King Charlton II smiled and gestured toward the chairs. After they were seated, the king took the main chair and looked at Ophelia with a measure of concern. How was your recovery? I heard you. He paused. I heard you experienced another one of your episodes. It's past. You needn't worry. Ophelia replied with a gentle nod. Have you settled back into the palace? Is it comfortable? He asked. It is. And the food? You were away for so long. Have you grown unaccustomed to the palace's cuisine? Ophelia looked at him, her expression unchanging, and simply gave a soft, everything is fine. After that, the old king ran out of things to say. A long, heavy silence fell over the study. The chilly, awkward atmosphere made Leo shift uncomfortably in his seat. He looked between the two of them, thinking, did you two just meet yesterday? You act like complete strangers. Seeing King Charlton II sitting there in silence, Leo tried to catch Ophelia's eye, urging her not to embarrass her father and to show him a little courtesy. Her light-colored eyes drifted coolly toward him for a second before turning away again. She remained silent. Leo sighed. Fine, if she didn't want to talk, she didn't have to. Maybe this was just how they interacted. He wouldn't stick his nose in it. But then, King Charlton II noticed Leo's amusing expression and suddenly chuckled. I hear you're a top student at Blackwood Academy. Leo smiled and nodded. First year, Magitech major. The king studied him. I know a little about you. I hear you have a unique talent for studying anomalies, and that you've never suffered from the madness that afflicts other superhumans. Leo hadn't expected the conversation to turn to him. He replied, my family are all scholars. We have a unique perspective on the occult, and in that regard, seeing the king's keen interest, Leo launched into an explanation. The old king nodded from time to time as he listened. Unexpectedly, the atmosphere that had grown cold from the father-daughter disconnect was now warming up again, all thanks to him. As King Charlton II and Leo continued their conversation, the The atmosphere in the study seemed to grow more and more amicable. But Leo only grew more confused. He couldn't figure out why the old king had summoned him. Summoning Ophelia was normal, but including him was strange. At first, Leo had assumed the king was displeased with his relationship with his daughter and was preparing to deliver a royal reprimand. Instead, not only had he not given Leo a hard time, but he was cheerfully chatting with him, especially when the topic turned to the incident in downtown New Haven 2 days prior. King Charles II's curiosity was piqued. I was told you possess an ability that can suppress the backlash from anomalous entities, and that 2 such entities assisted you during the investigation. Leo nodded. With so many people present at the time, it was impossible to keep it a secret. Of course, he didn't mention the sanctuary, sticking to his family research explanation. But at that moment, he was more concerned with something else. He looked at the old, frail king. When the topic came up, the king's gaze had sharpened for an instant. Leo realized he was particularly interested in the suppression of backlash, a point he'd raised several times. Could that be his real purpose? King Charlton too looked at his daughter and sighed. You and Ophelia are close, so you must know about her condition. When she was little, she often couldn't control her powers. The form she took after transforming terrified her brothers and sisters. Leo listened in silence as the king continued. Because of those accidents, a panic spread through the palace. The other children saw her as a monster. The staff saw her as a curse, and the rumors even spread beyond the palace walls. The church at the time spread malicious gossip that was very damaging to the empire. Because of all that, I had no choice but to confine her to a remote wing of the palace. Leo nodded silently. He remembered that the church was not yet under the king's complete control back then. The archbishop had even proclaimed that Ophelia's birth was an omen of great misfortune. King Charlton too looked at his daughter. Perhaps that was when she began to resent me as her father. In that matter, I was truly in the wrong. As he recounted these past events, his eyes were filled with apology. Ophelia, however, remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together. The king sighed, shook his head, and turned back to Leo, his tone grave. Since you have this ability, I trust you will look after Ophelia from now on. The people I've assigned to her, whether it's Carolyn or the Shadow Guards, are efficient, but they are not experts in this field. You can rest assured, Your Majesty, Leo immediately replied. I will do what is necessary. King Charlton too looked at Leo with approval. It seems Frederick's assessment of you was correct. A truly promising young man. Hearing you say that sets my mind at ease. The old king made a bit more small talk, his words filled with concern, like any ordinary, loving father. It seemed his only purpose today was to express his care for his daughter. Until, just as they were about to leave, he handed Ophelia a thick roll of parchment scrolls. And a mission. This is... Ophelia's placid expression finally flickered. There is something I need you to do for me. King Charlton II's gaze was profound. And only you can do it. On their way back to the banquet hall, Leo dismissed the attendant and looked at Ophelia, who had been lost in thought and silent the entire time. He didn't ask what mission her father had given her, but simply remarked with a smile, "It seems your father isn't as heartless as you said." Ophelia looked down the deep, wide corridor and suddenly let out a sneer. "And you believe him?" Leo instinctively glanced back, saw no one, and asked puzzled, "But his attitude toward you really has changed." It seemed he was genuinely trying to mend their relationship, something that would have been unimaginable 4 years ago. Ophelia cast a cool glance at him. "I've always thought you were a very good liar. By that logic, shouldn't you also be an expert at seeing through lies?" Leo gave a helpless smile. "What are you talking about? Even liars can be fooled. Besides, what do you mean I'm a good liar? Is that really the impression you have of me?" Seeing Leo's mock-offended expression, Ophelia broke into a smile. She linked her arm with his, leaning against him. "You managed to trick me into your grasp. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call you the greatest liar of all. You should be proud." Leo just shook his head, smiling. "I'll take that as a compliment." Ophelia's expression suddenly turned serious as she returned to the topic. "Don't you find it strange that his version of events is so different from what actually happened?" Leo thought carefully. The old king seemed full of regret for his past actions, but his explanation seemed to absolve himself of blame, framing it as if he had been forced into it by circumstance. But Ophelia had told him before that the king had been furious when her anomalous identity was exposed, flying into a rage. Ophelia's eyes glinted with mockery. If he truly cared for and loved his daughter, would he have ignored her for nearly a decade? Would he have allowed her to be ostracized and bullied without intervening? Would he have just cast her aside? Her voice was laced with resentment. Leo gently stroked her trembling shoulders, silently soothing her. He acted that way for one reason, and one reason only. They slowed their pace, stepping out into the empty royal gardens. Under the night sky, all was quiet, far from the bustle of the banquet. Ophelia leaned silently in Leo's embrace. She whispered, "Do you remember our family's bloodline?" Leo nodded grimly. "I do." The Wigner royal family had always claimed to be descendants of the dragon progenitor, a sacred line of dragonkin with the most noble blood in the world. Their family crest reflected this. At its center, surrounded by briar roses, was a fearsome black dragon. But in reality, their so-called sacred bloodline, their golden blood, was a complete fabrication, a lie to deceive the masses. The sanctuary did not lie, and the species listed in Ophelia's file did not lie. Leo knew what they were. Her entire family was a clan of anomalous monsters. It was just that for most of their descendants, the bloodline remained dormant. In the last century, only a handful had exhibited atavistic traits. Ophelia was the unlucky and lucky one. This was the Wigner dynasty's most guarded secret. So when Ophelia had unintentionally displayed her powers and revealed her terrifying true form, King Charlton II had been so enraged because the myth upon which his family's divinity was built was in danger of being shattered. He immediately locked down the information, killing servants who had seen too much and finding a pretext to permanently silence the talkative archbishop. His subsequent treatment of Ophelia was easy enough to imagine. As for why he's trying so hard to flatter me now, Ophelia's voice was muffled against his chest. It's simply because he sees that I still have value. Everything he does has one purpose, and one purpose only. He loves only one thing. Leo nodded in solemn agreement. Power. In the deep darkness, Ophelia looked down at the parchment scroll in her hand. She unrolled it and let out a cold, humorless laugh. Written on it were 4 words: the dragon tomb of Antaeus. After Leo and Ophelia left the study, an old man in a hooded robe appeared in the room. His eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. Looking in the direction the two had gone, he asked, "Has your majesty assigned her the task?" King Charlton II stood with his hands behind his back, his expression dark as he stared at the Wigner family crest. The benevolent fatherly facade was completely gone. "Everything she needs to do is written on the scroll," he said coolly. "When she reaches the ancestral tomb, she will know what is required of her." The robed man nodded, though his tone was laced with worry. "There are disturbances coming from beneath the ancestral tomb, and the tomb keepers have gone silent. This hasn't happened in 300 years. Could it be true, as the rumors say? Is that being about to awaken?" King Charlton II shook his head slightly. "I don't know. That's why she must go and investigate. At present, she is the only one in the family whose bloodline is strong enough to enter that place." The robed man looked at him. "If this is true, her chances of survival are slim. The Ophelia girl is quite clever. A pity." The study fell silent for a moment. Finally, King Charlton II let out a soft sigh. "Everything is for the greater good. The child will understand." Back in the banquet hall, the evening was drawing to a close. Leo scanned the room, searching for Professor Evelyn. He found her in a corner, surrounded by a group of young noblemen. Professor Evelyn was clutching a wine glass, her flushed face a mask of fury as she slurred her words. Leo frowned and started to walk over. Then he remembered himself and glanced back at Ophelia. "I'll be right back." Ophelia looked from Evelyn's cornerback to Leo, a dismissive smile playing on her lips. "Go on." She waved a careless hand. "I'm not that possessive. Go find your vampire teacher." Leo smiled, touched. An understanding Ophelia was a truly adorable sight. Watching him turn and leave without a moment's hesitation, Ophelia's smile turned into a colder, more contemptuous sneer. "And you say there's nothing between you two? Liar." By the time Leo reached Evelyn's corner, she had already unceremoniously driven away the young men who had been trying to ask her to dance. The alcohol had loosened her tongue, and her insults were brutally direct. Leo saw the faces of the young men darken as they retreated. He couldn't help but smile. He had worried for nothing. Professor Evelyn was more than capable of fending for herself. She didn't need him playing the hero. "Eve," he started to say as he got closer, but before he could finish, he was hit by a wave of alcohol fumes. Evelyn, not even looking to see who it was, just snapped. "Get lost." "I wasn't going to ask you to dance," Leo said with a soft laugh. "Professor, must you be so heartless?" Evelyn's eyes were glazed over. She squinted, and when she finally recognized Leo, her pretty face contorted with even more rage. You finally remembered to come back. Finished with your little date? And now you remember me? Oomph. You. She swayed, grabbing the front of his suit, her expression as fierce as a cornered cat. You. Little. Bastard. Professor, I think you've had too much to drink. Leo reached out to steady her. She collapsed against him, and the scent of wine mixed with her own faint, personal fragrance filled the air. I'm not drunk. How could I be drunk? I can hold my liquor. Leo gave her a once-over. Her face was as red as a ripe tomato. Her eyes were hazy, and she could barely stand. That was the opposite of holding her liquor. Drunk people never admit they're drunk, Leo said, propping her up. Keep telling yourself that. This is probably the first time you've ever had a drink, isn't it? What tolerance? And you drank so much. Didn't I warn you? But Evelyn seemed to be on another planet. Like a petulant child, she started weakly pummeling his chest, muttering, "Heartbreaker. Little bastard. Stop. How could you do this to your teacher? I'm so hurt." The commotion in the corner began to attract the attention of other guests, who shot them amused glances. Leo managed an embarrassed smile, catching the eye of Director Fredericks, who was struggling to contain his laughter. Fredericks shot him a conspiratorial wink and a silent thumbs up. This kid, a girl on each arm, quite the player. Leo looked across the room to Ophelia and mouthed, "I'm leaving." Ophelia just rolled her eyes dramatically. With that, Leo supported Professor Evelyn and, after a word with a nearby attendant, left the banquet hall. Once outside the palace, the alcohol seemed to completely take over Evelyn's brain. She giggled uncontrollably, her hands wandering all over Leo's body. "Professor, would you stop groping me? Hee, your muscles are pretty firm." "Professor, ooh, what did I just touch?" Seeing her completely uninhibited, Leo had had enough. He grabbed both of her wrists and, with a grunt, roughly hoisted her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. This only made Evelyn laugh harder, more wildly. As a result, the journey from the palace gates to the main street took an eternity. By the time they finally found a carriage and made it back to the old house, it was well past midnight. He knocked on the door, and Helena's excited voice called from inside. "Brother, you're finally back. Are you feeling okay now?" "Huh, what's wrong with her?" Leo practically dragged the dead-drunk Evelyn inside and dumped her on the sofa, panting from the effort. On the couch, Evelyn showed no signs of sobering up, just giggling foolishly to herself. Hey. Leo decided to use her as a cautionary tale for Helena. He pointed at the heap on the sofa and looked at his sister sternly. "See this? Don't drink. This is what happens when you drink. You turn into a drooling idiot." "Oh." Helena blinked her big blue eyes and said obediently, "I understand, brother." She glanced at the vampire on the sofa with a look of disdain. "There's some sobriety serum upstairs. I'll go get it." She scurried up the stairs. Leo looked at Evelyn, who had now passed out and was snoring softly, and sighed with a headache. Just as he was about to turn away, she latched onto his hand with surprising strength. "Professor," he asked, looking down at her. Evelyn was still sound asleep, but she mumbled something, her voice thick and indistinct, tinged with a hint of sadness. "Leo, I was lying. I was jealous." In the second week after the cultist case was officially closed, the storm that had swept through the city finally began to subside. The once deserted streets started to fill with pedestrians and carriages, shops reopened, and New Haven was slowly returning to its former prosperity. Of course, not everyone was happy about it, especially not the students, as all of New Haven schools were reopening their doors. Leo, a messenger bag slung over one shoulder, strolled into the Magitech A classroom. As he went to put his bag down, he noticed the atmosphere was strange. The moment he appeared, the entire class had fallen silent. He looked around, puzzled, as every eye in the room fixed on him. "What are you all?" Before he could finish, the room erupted in thunderous applause. "It's the great hero, Leo, the hero of the city. You were amazing. Oh, Leo, you're so cool." Even Chloe, his usually reserved desk mate, rushed over excitedly, clutching a newspaper and asking for his autograph. "I told my best friend. I told her Leo Sterling sits right next to me and that we're really good friends, and she didn't believe me. Leo, you have to sign this for me. Oh, and if you could give me a personal photo as proof, that would be even better." Leo took the newspaper and glanced at it, finally understanding what was going on. The headline on the front page read, "The Untold Story. Blackwood Academy, Student Saves the City." In the center of the page was a photo of Captain Raymond's enthusiastically grabbing his arm, while Leo, looking deeply reluctant, turned away, trying to shield his face from the camera's flash. A few police officers and P6.I agents stood beside them. The picture had been taken at the City Hall commendation ceremony a few days ago. Leo had desperately wanted to avoid any publicity, afraid that certain people would find out he was back. He tried to follow his old playbook and push all the credit onto the police department's star player, Captain Raymond's, but his attendance had been mandated from on high. Refusal was not an option. He read on. The article claimed that a young student, Leo Sterling, had seen through the Great Fog's insidious plot, improved the design of the gas masks, and ultimately helped the brave and powerful emergency responders capture the vicious cultists. Fortunately, the police had evacuated civilians in time, so the entire incident resulted in minimal loss of life and property. The real mastermind, the chaos in the downtown district, and the cult's true goal, summoning an outer god, were not mentioned at all. Instead, they propped up a student who was obsessed with detective games, turning the whole catastrophe into something that sounded like child's play, putting a positive spin on a disaster. Leo understood. The real story had been deliberately concealed by the authorities. Otherwise, public outrage would have been directed squarely at the incompetent police and members of the royal family. A less prominent story further down the page was even more telling. It went to great lengths to explain that the incident had nothing to do with the magitech industry, and that Ethereum crystals were still safe. The concerned and benevolent king had even pushed through the new Ethereum Crystal Act. Henceforth, the public could once again place their trust in the magitech industry. Factories were set to reopen en masse, blah, blah, blah. It seemed the entire Wigner terror incident was being swept under the rug. Leo looked at the paper and couldn't help but smile cynically. Placing the paper on his desk, he took out a fountain pen. The signature is fine, but I don't have any photos. Chloe's face fell with disappointment. She stared at Leo's face, then came up with another idea. Okay, then how about this? Be a guest at my house tonight for my family's dinner party. I'll invite my friend over and make her so jealous. Leo handed the signed newspaper back to her. Sorry, but I have plans tonight. Tomorrow, then. Chloe pressed. Tomorrow night works too. Leo had to refuse again. Too many people. I'm an introvert, kind of shy. I don't really like family gatherings. Chloe looked at him and said, a little bashfully, well, if that's the case, it could just be the two of us. Leo frowned. But didn't you want to prove it to your friend? Inviting him over late at night, just the two of them. He looked at her helplessly. Her intentions were so obvious, it was almost painful. Chloe blushed and lowered her head, unable to say another word. The rest of the class erupted in good-natured laughter. As the school reopened, Professor Evelyn's sick leave ended, and she returned to teaching. When the crisp click-clack of high heels echoed down the hallway, the students seemed to recall the terror of being ruled by the cold-blooded she-devil. In an instant, the rowdy classroom fell silent, every student suddenly pretending to be a diligent scholar. A moment later, Professor Evelyn appeared at the door, a stack of papers under her arm. She scanned the room with a blank expression, then slapped the papers down on her lectern. Pop quiz, she announced. You've had a long break. Let's see if you've been doing any studying at home. A test on the very first day back? The entire class let out a collective groan of despair. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, a terrifying chill emanating from her gaze. The classroom fell silent again. The students were too scared to even look up, frozen in fear. Leo watched this unfold with a grin he couldn't suppress. The contrast between Evelyn in teacher mode and her usual self was just too much. He was probably the only person in the room who dared to look her in the eye in this atmosphere. With a mischievous smirk, he openly admired the sight of her on the lecturer's platform. She was wearing her usual work attire, a crisp shirt with a white cravat, simple and elegant, and a high-waisted black skirt with a built-in belt that cinched her waist, accentuating her slender figure and generous curves. It was impossible to look away. Professor Evelyn had always been stunning, but that wasn't the only reason he was staring. It was the stark contrast of her persona. Who could imagine that this stern-faced, intimidating professor was, in private, such a different person, and that while she dressed so modestly on the platform, she went au naturel at home. His mind inexplicably conjured an image of her at the house, wandering around in nothing but an oversized white button-down shirt. The flash of pale skin, the gentle sway. Perhaps his blatant staring was too intense. Evelyn's brow furrowed, and she shot a cold glare toward Leo, who was sitting by the window. His gaze didn't waver. If anything, he looked even more excited. Yes, that's the look. On the surface, a cold, strict teacher, but at home, a lazy, seductive, untamable vixen. Yes, that was it. That contrast. On the platform, seeing the boy's gaze grow hotter and more undisguised, Evelyn's lip twitched in annoyance. Leo just gave her a cheeky grin. She shot him a furious glare, but remembering she was in a classroom, she immediately schooled her features back into a neutral mask. For the rest of the class, however, she didn't dare look in his direction again. After the pop quizzes were handed out and collected, the class period flew by. As the bell neared, another wave of sighs swept through the classroom, most students feeling they hadn't done well. Evelyn gave the collected papers a cursory glance, and her expression immediately darkened. You got this question wrong. Wasn't this test simple? Did any of you actually review the material at home? Her face was a thundercloud as her cold eyes swept over the class. We're already halfway through the semester, and you've shown no improvement. Do you want me to fail you? I'm telling you now, failing an entire class is not without precedent for me. If you want to graduate, you had better start understanding the core curriculum. The students' faces grew even more miserable. Finally, however, Evelyn's expression softened into a rare look of satisfaction. She smiled toward the window seat. Although the class as a whole performed poorly, I must commend a few students. For example, Mr. Sterling. Leo blinked. Look at him. He managed to keep up with his studies even while hospitalized. He helped the police department solve a major case and still kept up with his coursework. The only question he missed was the final problem on the entire test. All of you should go home and reflect on why you worked so hard to get into Blackwood Academy in the first place. Do you even want to make something of yourselves? Most of the students bowed their heads in shame, while a few looked at Leo with admiration and envy. Only Leo himself just smiled and shook his head, as if it were no big deal. Of course, he'd aced the test. Professor Evelyn had been tutoring him every night. With a private tutor like her, the Magitech curriculum was a cakewalk. He'd had a head start on every other student in the major. Of course, Evelyn was far too lazy at home to make him study. It was Leo who had insisted on it. If she taught well, there were rewards. If she taught poorly, well, there were still rewards. Evelyn was not the type to get the short end of the stick. After school, Leo and Evelyn coincidentally boarded the same steam bus. Although the authorities had repeatedly stressed that steam-powered transport was safe, the bus was still nearly empty. With plenty of open seats, Leo slid into the one next to Evelyn with a wide grin. She shot him an exasperated look. In class, could you please not stare at me like that? Leo feigned confusion. But I'm a student. If I don't look at the teacher during class, who am I supposed to look at? He had a point, and it left her speechless for a moment. But then she recalled the scorching heat of his gaze in the classroom, the undisguised desire in his eyes, and her cheeks began to burn. The thought brought a flush of anger to her face. No, don't change the subject. You know that's not a student's gaze. It was lecherous. If you keep looking at me like that, how am I supposed to teach? What do you mean it wasn't a student's gaze? Leo protested, feigning offense. That gaze reflected a student's passion for knowledge. It was an expression of admiration and affection for the greatest teacher, Professor Evelyn. Why is your mind always in the gutter? Or perhaps, you're actually the kind of person, which is why you immediately jumped to such naughty conclusions. You little bastard. Evelyn glared at him. Stop trying to sweet-talk me. From now on, you will behave yourself in my class, or I'll fail you. Yes, Professor, Leo replied with a grin. Seeing his roguish expression, she had no idea if he'd actually listened and could only sigh in resignation. The bus was filled with strangers, so Evelyn quietly leaned her head against Leo's shoulder. It's been a while since I taught. I'm so tired. An alluring fragrance filled his senses. Leo looked at Evelyn, so close to him. She was silent, but he had a feeling she had something to say. He enjoyed the quiet moment, gazing out the window at the world passing by. New Haven was returning to its usual bustling self. Suddenly, Evelyn asked softly, that night at the banquet, after I got drunk, I didn't say anything to you, did I? As she said it, Leo felt her sneak a peek at him, her posture cautious. He couldn't help but smile. Oh, you did. You said a lot of things, Professor. Evelyn immediately sat bolt upright, her voice tight with anxiety. Like what? What did I say? Leo put on a grave and serious expression. You said, I love Leo so much. I really, really love him. I can't live without him. And then you started clinging to me and sobbing hysterically. What? Evelyn's entire face turned a shade of crimson, so deep you could see it happen. She started stammering. Did I really say that? How could I say something like that? Damn it. She lowered her head in mortification, looking like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. I knew I shouldn't have been drinking. I've never had that stuff before. What possessed me to drink so much? I'm going to die. How could I say those things? It's so embarrassing. She shot her head back up. Leo, you have to promise you won't take it seriously. I was drunk and talking nonsense. Then she saw him, staring at her, his lips twitching as he desperately tried to hold back a laugh. You're lying to me. Evelyn lunged at him furiously. You tricked me again. Why am I so stupid? I fell for it again. As she playfully attacked him, Leo held up his hands in surrender. Professor, I was just trying to spare you the embarrassment. Look at you now. You're so much happier. Embarrassment? Why would I be embarrassed? Oh, you'd definitely be embarrassed if I told you what you really said. Suddenly, Evelyn froze. Wait, did I really say something I shouldn't have that night? She immediately covered her face with her hands, too ashamed to speak another word. If I ever drink again, I'm a dog. Amid their playful bickering, the steam bus stopped at Riverfront Road in the East End. As they walked home together, Evelyn suddenly started to complain. Can't we buy a car? This commute is so long. We waste so much time on the road. Leo nodded. New Haven was huge, and getting around was inconvenient. It was probably time to get a vehicle. Just so we're clear, I don't have any money. Evelyn quickly added. I know, Leo said, looking at her with a deadpan expression. This woman was not only a vampire, but also broke. Her entire university salary was spent on cosmetics, shopping, handbags, and clothes. The family's getting bigger, so we can't get anything too small, Leo mused. The engine can't be too weak, either, and we have to consider comfort. Helena gets carsick easily. As he thought, his gaze drifted to their neighbor's house across the street. I think our neighbor's car is pretty nice. We could get a model like that. They were neighbors in the loosest sense of the word. Their house was a good 500 yards away, but it was the closest one to the old estate. Mentioning the neighbor seemed to trigger something in Leo's memory. He and Evelyn exchanged a silent look. Then their eyes widened in unison. We never returned the car. But that car had been wrecked in the chaos that had consumed downtown New Haven. Leo pictured the fine vehicle's pathetic final state, crushed, shattered. Its only value now was as scrap metal. Maybe the steam engine could be salvaged for a decent price. Fortunately, he had received a large reward from the city after the commendation ceremony, so he wasn't short on cash. At worst, he could just buy the neighbor a new one. When Leo and Evelyn, their faces etched with guilt, knocked on their neighbor's door, the man who answered took one look at Leo and jumped back in fright. We don't have a car anymore. Go borrow from someone else. It seemed the sight of him with a revolver last time had left a lasting impression. Leo held up his hands helplessly. We're not here to borrow your car this time. We're here to return it. The neighbor eyed him cautiously, and seeing that he wasn't holding a gun, finally relaxed. Well, in that case, there's no rush. Oh, right, there was one other thing. I almost forgot. The neighbor looked at Leo and slapped his own forehead. My memory. Wait, right here. He turned and fumbled with a cabinet in the entryway. Leo and Evelyn exchanged puzzled looks. A moment later, the neighbor returned with an exquisite envelope. A postman delivered this a few days ago, but there was no one home at your place. This kind of letter requires a signature on delivery, so he left it with me. A letter? Leo took it, frowning. Who would send him a letter? Anyone who knew him could just come find him. He examined the envelope, then turned it over. The moment he saw the sender's information, his gaze froze. Hegar's town, city of Brugge, southern region, Wigner Empire. Tilly, the sender was. The wizard. The moment he saw the letter was from Tilly, Leo lost all interest in making small talk with his neighbor. He pocketed the envelope, paid the man for the car, and left in a hurry. Of course, he didn't use his own money. He wrote an IOU and told the neighbor to take it to Captain Raymond's at the East End precinct for reimbursement. Back home, Leo sat down on the sofa and tore open the letter with shaking hands. Brother? What's wrong? Helena, seeing his tense expression, came over curiously. Evelyn just pouted. Look how anxious he is. It must be a letter from one of his old flames. What? Who is it? Helena's expression changed instantly. She whirled on Leo. But just as she was about to demand an answer, she saw him staring blankly at an empty sheet of paper. It's blank. Evelyn was also stunned, unable to understand the sender's intent. Leo examined the blank page, studying it for a long time. He held it up to the light, but there was still nothing there. Seriously? You sent a blank piece of paper halfway across the country? For what? Maybe she got confused and sent the wrong one. Evelyn guessed. No way. Helena, having seen the sender's name, scowled. She's not that kind of person. She did this on purpose. On purpose for what? Evelyn asked. To tell us that she knows brother is back. Helena said resentfully. She's making her presence known. Her motive is obvious. Evelyn looked at Helena's indignant expression and couldn't help but smile wearily. Don't you think you're being a little conspiratorial? Oomph. Helena clenched her small fist. When it came to her brother's old girlfriends, she had to be on high alert. As the three of them stared at the blank letter, stumped, something began to happen. A mysterious, deep blue light started to shimmer on the page in Leo's hands. They watched transfixed as the light traced a path across the paper. When it finally faded, lines of elegant, beautiful script had appeared. Now, that's an interesting bit of magic, Evelyn said in surprise. Could that be the circle magic from the old texts? A mystic sigil? Using that just to write a letter seems like a bit of a waste, doesn't it? The more she thought about it, the more surprised she became. Forget that. Are there still people using circle magic today? Aren't they afraid of losing control? The sudden development left Leo silent for a moment. The sender's goal was obviously to prevent the contents from being read by others, but had the unintended effect of being a show of power. Tilly might not have meant it that way, but it immediately reminded Leo that he was dealing with a powerful spellcaster. He read the contents of the letter in silence. My dearest Leo, it has been 4 years since we parted in Blackwater. In all the time you were gone, I never stopped searching for you. I was overjoyed to hear the news of your safe return. You must have endured unimaginable hardships to come back. I am so sorry I wasn't there to help you. I have not been idle in your absence. Do you remember the magical research I have been conducting? I have finally made a breakthrough. I believe I am closer than ever to the truth of magic. However, a small problem has arisen during my research. Could you come and help me? A discovery this great is something I hope to witness with you. By the way, my location is the address on the envelope. Please come quickly. Is my sister with you? Bring her along as well. I have chosen wonderful gifts for you both. I eagerly await the day we are reunited. Forever yours, Tilly. Leo put down the letter and picked up the envelope again, looking at the address. Hegar's Town, City of Brugge, Southern Region. It's Brugge. Evelyn suddenly lit up. Leo, you promised me, remember? You said that once things in New Haven were settled, you'd take me there for a vacation. She was now fascinated by human life and desperately wanted to try all the things she had missed out on as a bloodkin, like basking in the sun on a southern beach. The thought alone made her happy. What a coincidence, Leo said with a weary smile. When he was trying to win them over, he had painted the city of Brugge as a veritable paradise. To be fair, Brugge was a nice place, the largest port city in the south, a hub for ships and merchants from all over the northern continent. Unlike the gloomy weather of New Haven, the sun shone there year-round, making it a popular vacation spot for the wealthy. But in his desperation to survive, Leo had oversold it, practically describing it as heaven on earth. If Evelyn actually went, she was bound to be a little disappointed. Wait. Helena snatched the letter from him, looking at her brother with pleading eyes. You're not actually going, are you? I have a bad feeling about this. Leo looked at her. Her small face was tense with seriousness. It's a conspiracy. A huge conspiracy. Evelyn, snapping out of her pleasant daydream, looked at Leo. For her to summon you with such urgency, her motives are probably not so pure. Do you think it's a setup? Leo nodded silently. After his experiences with Helena and Ophelia, he would be a fool to believe there wasn't a conspiracy involved. This wizard lady. Evelyn looked at Helena curiously. What kind of person is she? Her. Helena crossed her arms and snorted. She had nothing good to say about any of her brother's old flames. In the beginning, she was the only one by his side, but then they came and stole all his attention. However, her assessment of this wizard was considerably higher than her opinion of Ophelia. Her personality is actually quite nice. She's polite, just doesn't talk much. A bit of a loner, kind of reclusive. Oh, Evelyn nodded. That fit her image of a witch devoted to her magic. But, Helena added, I think there might be something wrong with her head. Sometimes you really don't know what she's thinking. She's neurotic. If even you think she's neurotic, Evelyn muttered under her breath, then she must really have a few screws loose. What did you say? Helena shot to her feet. Vampire. I am Bloodkin, you tentacle monster. Old hag, I'll kill you. You two calm down for a minute. Leo watched as they squared up, ready for their daily brawl. His head was already starting to ache. As he thought about Helena's description of the wizard, an image of her formed in Leo's mind. A young witch with long black hair and mysterious violet eyes. She was a member of the Order of Magical Arcanists, the #1 heretical organization on the church's most wanted list. Due to her exceptional talent, she held a high rank within the order. Leo had met her while investigating a case involving the Arcanists. The order was, in fact, a remnant of the ancient Magus Imperium, dedicated to researching the ultimate secrets of magic and seeking the truth of the world. a goal of undeniable grandeur. In practice, however, they were far more dangerous than most cults, to the point of being utterly depraved. The memory of what they had done to innocent villagers in the name of research during his first playthrough still sent a chill down his spine. Compared to them, the recently dismantled cult of truth, with its drug-peddling schemes, seemed downright adorable. At least their goal was just to make money, not to commit acts of terror in the name of truth. As for Tilly herself, she belonged to a less radical faction within the order. But even so, the sheer negativity radiating from her was unnerving. She was a deeply melancholic young woman. Whenever an experiment failed, a flash of violence in her violet eyes always made Leo feel that she wasn't as rational as she appeared on the surface. Her words and actions sometimes betrayed a deep weariness, a profound disgust for the world, and a sense of utter despair. But she had always managed to control it, hiding the darkness within and offering Leo a tired smile. But that was 4 years ago. Leo wasn't sure if she was still the same person. Tilly had said in her letter that she was closer to the truth of magic. Had she really achieved the Order's ultimate goal, a pursuit that had spanned nearly 1,000 years? Or was it just a lure to draw him into a trap? But this was her life's ambition. Would she really joke about something like that? Perhaps. It was a bit of both. When she had lived in the old house, she often discussed occult matters with Leo. Fortunately, his library was filled with relevant texts, including rare manuscripts that couldn't be found anywhere else. Though she was the quiet, reclusive type, they never ran out of things to talk about. Some of Leo's own philosophies aligned with hers, particularly the practical application of magic. They both saw value in New Haven's magitech industry and agreed that the Order of Magical Arcanists had lost its way. Because of this, Tilly had always seen him as a comrade in arms, a kindred spirit, her best friend. That's why she would think a matter like this would be enough to entice him. As he reminisced, Helena and Evelyn gradually fell silent. Evelyn pointed at Leo, lost in his memories, and deliberately poked at Helena. "Your brother is reminiscing about his old flame, you know." Helena's expression grew darker. She suddenly felt that she probably couldn't stop her brother from going. Evelyn hadn't even considered that aspect. She knew Leo would go no matter what. Instead, she picked up the envelope and studied the address. "Where's this Hegra's town? I've never heard of it." She even ran to the study and brought back a map of the Empire's administrative districts. After searching for a long time, she still couldn't find it. Town-level locations often aren't marked unless they're particularly important, Leo said, shaking his head. He walked to the entryway and put on his overcoat. "I'll go see Captain Raymond's. He should be able to look it up. I'm coming with you." Evelyn's form flickered, and she instantly appeared at the door. "Me too." Helena quickly trotted after them. New Haven Police Department, East End Precinct. In his office, Leo looked at the beaming Captain Raymond's. "Are you getting a promotion? You look awfully happy." Raymond's chuckled and shook his head. "A promotion is out of the question. Do you know how many people have their eyes on the inspector's position?" Leo frowned. "After all the cases you've solved over the years, cases no ordinary captain could handle, you can't even make inspector?" Raymond's looked at Leo and his two companions with a wry smile. "Sometimes, doing your job too well can backfire. Think about it. If I get promoted, who's going to handle all these difficult cases?" "You've got to be kidding me," Leo said, shaking his head. He wondered if he should ask Ophelia to pull some strings for the captain, but then thought better of it. It wasn't that he didn't want to ask, but he was afraid that if Raymond's got promoted that way, he'd be branded as one of the Fifth Princess's men, which would undoubtedly attract unnecessary trouble. Raymond's was a survivor when it came to monsters, but whether his political savvy would be enough to navigate the Empire's whirlpool of power was another question entirely. "I'm happy because after all this hard work, my superiors have finally granted me administrative leave." Captain Raymond's leaned back in his office chair, looking completely relaxed. The golden coast of the southern cities, sunshine every day. Just thinking about it makes me feel good. The three of them paused. Finally, Leo let out a weary smile. "The place you're taking your vacation. It wouldn't happen to be Brugge, would it?" "How did you know?" Raymond's suddenly sat up straight. He looked at Leo's resigned and knowing expression and was struck by a terrible sense of foreboding. "You're not going there too, are you?" Leo nodded honestly. "I am." He glanced at Officer Leon, who was at the filing cabinet. "The files I asked him to pull are for that area." Captain Raymond's froze, the smile slowly vanishing from his face. "It's over. It's over. You going alone is fine. Me going alone is fine. But if we both go together, God only knows what kind of massive case is going to pop up there." He rushed over to his assistant. "Check it for me. Now, any bad news out of Brugge recently? Cults? Enemy spies? Dark wizards, serial killers, human traffickers, anomalous monsters, superhumans who've lost control. Evelyn glanced at Leo. He's pretty thorough. I can't imagine what else could go wrong. Leo nodded grimly. The captain has seen it all. Raymond's muttered and sighed, his voice filled with despair. Oh, my vacation. I've already bought the round-trip tickets. My wife has already picked out her swimsuit. Officer Leon gave his boss a long-suffering look before walking over to Leo with a stack of files. Mr. Sterling, I found that Hagerstown you mentioned. The town's administrative charter was revoked 10 years ago. In other words, Hagerstown no longer officially exists. He looked at Leo, puzzled. But you said you receive a letter mailed from there? That should be impossible. Is that so? Leo's expression was one of surprise. He immediately began flipping through the old files. Evelyn and Helena leaned in, curious. Officer Leon continued. I gave a quick look. 10 years ago, the fishing industry in Hagerstown was booming. Most of the townspeople were fishermen, and the town was very prosperous. They held frequent festivals, and the people were known for being simple, honest, and hospitable. So what happened to it? Leo asked, looking up at him. For a town dependent on fishing to suddenly decline, something must have gone wrong with the catch. To his surprise, Leon walked over and quickly flipped through a few pages for him, stopping at a section with old newspaper clippings. The clippings had yellowed with age, and the text was faded, but Leo could still make out a few unusually disturbing clues. Unknown plague, townspeople driven mad, grotesque appearances, spate of disappearances, residents of neighboring areas avoid town at all costs. No one dares to trade for Hager seafood. Brugge city government dispatches military to suppress. Incident unresolved. Leo silently flipped through the yellowed files, feeling a dark cloud hanging over the small town of Hegres, obscuring the truth of what had happened there all those years ago. It also made him wonder what Tilly's true purpose was in inviting him. Just then, a system notification popped up, perfectly matching the atmosphere. The shadow of Hegres proceed to Hegres town and investigate the truth behind the cover-up. Subsequent tasks will be updated. Save point, New Haven Police Department, East End Precinct reloads remaining. 5/5 Chapter 150. With a deafening blast of its whistle, the massive steam train gradually slowed, finally pulling into the station amidst a choking cloud of thick smoke. As passengers bustled around them, Leo stepped gracefully from the train. He wore a light-colored, casual suit, a soft fedora, and carried a gentleman's cane. The sight of him and his three beautiful companions drew more than a few appreciative glances. The weather in Brugge was bright and sunny. As far as the eye could see, there were none of the towering, tightly packed buildings common in New Haven. Instead, the architecture was low and open, with the white walls and red-tiled roofs characteristic of the southern coastal region. It was just past noon, and the entire city was bathed in a warm, golden light. For Leo, accustomed to the gloomy, overcast skies of New Haven, the change was a welcome one. The feeling of the sun on his skin was so pleasant it made him want to stretch his arms out and embrace it. People really did need more sunlight. He'd heard that staying cooped up in sunless places could lead to depression and other mental issues. No wonder New Haven was crawling with so many deviants, lunatics, and cultists. In the distance, at the southernmost edge of the city, lay the harbor. The azure ocean met the sky with almost no discernible horizon, the two blending into one. A massive ship sounded its horn, startling a flock of white gulls into the air. The entire city felt vibrant and full of life. Leo's wonderful vacation had begun. Not bad at all, came Evelyn's cheerful chuckle from beside him. Wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a breezy white dress, Evelyn was excitedly taking in the sights of a city she had only heard about. If Leo's containment hadn't suppressed her bloodkin nature, she likely would never have set foot here in her entire life. I'm glad you like it, Professor. Seeing her so happy, Leo couldn't help but smile. He had come here under the pretext of an academic exchange. The rising star Professor Evelyn had been granted a spot to visit a partner institution, Southern Polytechnic, and she had appointed him as her teaching assistant. The paperwork had taken over a week to process, but seeing her so delighted made all the anticipation and hassle worthwhile. However, not everyone in their party was in high spirits. Brother. As soon as she stepped off the train, Helena pressed a hand to her mouth. Ugh. Leo quickly steadied her. She leaned against him weakly, her small face deathly pale. Brother. She looked up at him pitifully. I feel so sick. I think I'm going to throw up. Here, drink some water. Evelyn quickly rummaged through her travel bag. Leo supported her light frame and led her to a shaded spot. After a few sips of water, The color finally started to return to Helena's cheeks. Phew. She looked at the massive train with a lingering fear, her face downcast. I hate that big thing. I never want to ride it again. Leo looked at her miserable state and shook his head with a fond smile. The steam trains of this era were slow, and the cars were stuffy. Helena had been tormented for 3 full days and nights, her motion sickness and vomiting almost constant. She was clearly traumatized by the experience. Once we check into the hotel, we won't rush to Hagerstown. You can rest here and recover first. Yes. Evelyn quickly agreed. And I want to do some proper shopping. I can't come all this way for nothing. Okay. Helena nodded. When Leo offered her his hand, she just shook her head. Brother, I feel too sick. I can't walk. She looked up at him, her lips pouting sadly, her big blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You'll have to carry me, brother, she said, her voice a sweet, pleading whine as she held out her arms. The sight of her like this tugged at Leo's protective instincts, and his heart softened. All right, he agreed without hesitation and lifted her light body onto his back. It wasn't the princess Carrie she might have imagined, but with her arms wrapped around his neck, pressed closely against him, Helena was still incredibly happy. Yay! Leo started walking toward the station exit with Helena on his back. Evelyn followed behind, watching the beaming girl who suddenly didn't seem sick at all, and muttered to herself. Plain pitiful. It must be nice to be young. After checking into a decent hotel and getting Helena settled, Leo went out immediately to rent a carriage. Evelyn, meanwhile, had vanished. She'd claimed she was going to gather information for him, and had even put on a serious face, but the irrepressible excitement in her eyes as she left told him she was definitely going shopping. At the carriage rental, Leo made some inquiries. The journey from the port city of Brugge to the southeastern town of Hegres would take them through 2 more cities, for towns, and numerous small villages. It was a long trip. Worse, many of the drivers here had never even heard of Hegres town and refused a fare. He finally found one who knew of the place, but the man's face paled the moment he heard the name. Hegres? You want to go to that godforsaken place? The driver waved his hands frantically. No way. Are you trying to get me killed? I wouldn't go there for any amount of money. Leo looked at him curiously. The place has been abandoned for 10 years, hasn't it? Is it still that dangerous? It's not a matter of danger. That place is cursed, the driver said, his face grim. He glanced around nervously, as if just speaking the town's name might bring bad luck. But I have urgent business there, Leo said, touching his wallet. Money is no object. I can pay you 5 times the normal fare. It's really not about the money. The driver's eyes flickered to Leo's wallet, and he hesitated for a moment. Young man, judging by your clothes, you must be a gentleman from New Haven. Let me tell you, there's something strange about that town. Anyone who goes there gets tainted by misfortune. It's no place for a gentleman like you. If you like the southern coastal scenery, I can take you to some other towns, no extra charge. Tainted by misfortune? Leo's curiosity grew. Have other people been there recently? How else would a rumor like that get started? The driver seemed to recall something unpleasant and shuddered, then clammed up completely. Leo pressed a bill with the old king's face on it into the man's hand. This isn't for the fare. I just want to hear what you know. Tell me everything. It's really not about the money. The driver said, even as he discreetly pocketed the bill. He muttered under his breath, You young people, why are you always so curious? Having taken the money, the driver finally opened up. He told Leo 2 strange rumors he had heard about the place. The driver lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. A while back, a year, maybe 2, some poor fool, without an ounce of sense passed through there. Heard the idiot was trying to take a shortcut, save a few dollars on his way to the archipelago. He only stayed in Hegres town for 1 night. When he came back, he was stark raving mad. Mad? Leo's brow furrowed. Completely, the driver affirmed. They say he ran around all night, filthy and screaming. Folks from the next town overfound him. All he could yell was, Fish! It's all fish, and a bunch of other nonsense. Couldn't hold a normal conversation. Utterly gone. They sent him to 6 asylums, but no one could fix him. Fish. Leo mulled over the word. What was so terrifying about fish? What else? He asked. The driver dredged up another memory. And then there was that business a while ago. A merchant dealt in seafood. Heard a rumor somewhere that the town used to have a booming fishing industry. Got greedy, you see. Figured the town might be abandoned, but the fish wouldn't just up and leave. So he took a crew with him to check it out. Not a single one of them ever came back. Word is they all died there. Leo thought it over. You say the place has been abandoned for 10 years, but based on your stories, people must have been living there all along. Otherwise, where would that traveler have stayed? Living there? The driver cracked a strange, unsettling smile. You really think what's living there are people? Seeing Leo's silence, the driver continued. That place is cursed by the gods, a wretched hole untouched by the light of the divine. They say when the city council sent men to clamp down 10 years ago, the townsfolk were all fearless lunatics. If there's anyone still there now, they got to be something worse than lunatics, worse than monsters. The mention of the Port of Brugge City Council made Leo suspicious. The council never went back to manage it. It's under their jurisdiction, and with things like this happening. The driver shook his head. That I don't know. Leo's frown deepened. The whole situation stank of strangeness, and the questions were piling up. Even so, he had to go. First, there was the system mission. Second, Tilly knew he was back. If he ignored her, he was asking for unforeseen trouble down the line. He was no longer the man who had first arrived in this world, filled with resistance and denial. Instead of avoiding his problems, he would meet them head-on, seize the initiative, and finally resolve the issues left over from his first playthrough. He had some of his strength back now, and he had them, the women who would stand with him. It gave him a sliver of confidence, a foundation to stand on, even when facing the formidable witch herself. Leo looked at the driver and smiled. Hegra's town, 3 one-way tickets, 5 times the normal fare. You in? I told you it's not about the money. The driver shook his head frantically, refusing to budge. 10 times. Night had fallen by the time they returned to the inn. Leo opened the window, and a fresh, salty sea breeze washed over him. The night view of Port of Brugge wasn't as spectacular as New Haven's, but as the waves gently lapped against the docks, the scattered points of light on the water's surface formed a constellation of a different kind of beauty. Helena was already fast asleep on the bed. Leo sat beside her, gently touching her forehead. It was a little warm, and her cheeks were flushed. It seemed to be more than just motion sickness. She was having a hard time adjusting to the new environment. Leo and Evelyn had enjoyed the seafood feast at lunch. Helena, perhaps clinging to a childhood habit of never wasting food, had cleaned her plate. It hadn't occurred to Leo that she might not like that kind of food. We'll get something lighter tomorrow, Leo murmured to himself. Just then, Helena mumbled in her sleep. Brother. She shifted restlessly, her lips pursed, and her arms and legs instinctively wrapped around Leo, who was sitting on the edge of the bed. Seeing her clinging to him like a little koala, Leo let out a helpless chuckle and tried to pull the blanket up over her. As he moved to stand, several slick black tentacles slithered out, wrapping around his body and refusing to let him go. He was used to her tentacles by now, but it was still an odd sensation when they slipped under his clothes and pressed against the skin. Helena. Brother, don't go. Just loosen up a little. Leo gently squeezed a tentacle coiled around his waist, trying to shift it. Instead, they tightened their grip. 6 tentacles roamed over his body, as if trying to cocoon him completely. Leo looked at Helena helplessly. In her deep sleep, she had stopped mumbling and now wore a comfortable, satisfied expression, as if his presence was a deep source of security. He had no choice but to lean back against the bed and stay with her. The sea breeze drifted in, and, after a long day, he felt a wave of drowsiness himself. Just as he was about to drift off, a sound echoed through the room. Leo's eyes snapped open to see Evelyn standing there, a look of sheer astonishment on her face as she stared at him and Helena. You too. Her eyes were fixed on the tentacles wrapped around Leo's body and the strangely serene expression on his face. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words, her mouth hanging half open. EW. Gross. She shot Leo a look that was impossible to describe, then made a little TSK sound. So this is what you're into. You're a real pervert. It's not. Let me explain. Leo felt deeply wronged. What was with that shocked and disgusted look? It wasn't like he'd asked for this. It's fine. I've heard that all men have some perverted desires deep down. And you, without a doubt, are even more perverted than most. Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. Me? Where am I perverted? I'm completely normal. Thank you very much. Leo stared speechlessly at Evelyn, who was now laden with shopping bags. What kind of image do you even have of me? Evelyn's expression screamed disbelief. If you weren't a pervert, why would you be surrounded by us? Isn't that classmate of yours, Chloe, pretty? Aren't there any good-looking girls in our class? Didn't someone from the class next door send you a love letter? Why do you ignore all of them? Leo stared at her, baffled. It occurred to him that she might have a point. Well, I guess. Wait. No. Leo felt like she was twisting his logic. It's not like I went looking for you guys. If I just started dating some normal girl, you wouldn't be the one ending up dead in an alley. Evelyn covered her mouth, giggling. Brother, The commotion finally woke Helena, and the black tentacles slowly retracted. Leo breathed a sigh of relief and shot Evelyn an annoyed glare. You were supposed to be gathering intelligence for me. You come back this late, loaded down with all this junk. Were you just goofing off all day? Evelyn placed her day's spoils on the table, then glanced petulantly at Leo and huffed. Who says? I wasn't just goofing off. I bought these on the way. The reason I'm so late is... She walked over and shut the door and windows tightly before lowering her voice. I want to see people from another clan. I have some old bloodkin friends here in Portabrugge. Leo thought back to the bright, sunny weather they'd had earlier. There are vampires here? I thought you said sunlight was bad for practicing blood magic. Shouldn't they hate this place? Evelyn rolled her eyes dramatically. Are you dense? They just don't go out during the day. Oh, Leo said. Right. Still, being confined for half the day seemed overly restrictive. In his mind, Portabrugge wasn't the kind of city where a major vampire clan would set up shop. And indeed, most bloodkin activity was concentrated in New Haven and some of the northern regions. Their clan is one of those that interacts frequently with humans. They're good at business, Evelyn explained dismissively. That's not important. Let me tell you what I found out. It's about your little witch. Leo's expression immediately turned serious, and he listened intently. Evelyn spoke slowly. Everything you told me about her is in the past. Right now, she's basically the second in command of the Order of Magical Arcanists. She's a full-blown cult leader. Do you know what the church's bounty list looks like these days? The entire Order of Magical Arcanists is number 1. She, by herself, is number 2. A chill went down Leo's spine. To be ranked that high on the church's wanted list. What in the world has she been doing for the last 4 years? Evelyn gave him a wry smile. None of your old flames are what you'd call low maintenance, are they? To the church and to the hunters, Tilly is known as the Calamity Witch. They say that wherever she goes, death, terror, and disaster follow in her wake. The Calamity Witch. Leo never would have imagined the witch's reputation with the church would be so infamous, let alone associated with the most negative words imaginable. It was a stark, jarring contrast to the Tilly he remembered. He pushed down the swirling thoughts and looked at Evelyn, waiting for her to finish. She continued, relaying the intelligence from her bloodkin contacts. In recent years, the Order of Magical Arcanists, an organization of dark mages that has always kept to the shadows, has become increasingly aggressive and brazen. They're openly attacking the city guard, assassinating clergy, casting large-scale forbidden dark magic, spreading plagues and panic. All signs point to them plotting something big, something world-shaking. But my friend's intelligence is limited. We don't know their true objective. As for your little witch, Evelyn looked at Leo and shook her head in resignation. She's in a league of her own. The intel says Tilly's status within the order is transcendent. She's become a spiritual leader. Over the past few years, she's been spotted all over the northern continent. Her shadow falls on nearly every major incident. And that title, the Calamity Witch, it comes from a clash she had with the church 4 years ago. Tilly appeared on the southeastern coast of the empire. The church got word and dispatched a nightly order to encircle and destroy her. But the operation didn't just fail to kill her. The entire order was annihilated. They say the earth shook, bodies littered the battlefield, and the sea itself was stained red with blood. It was a scene of absolute horror. But then again, Evelyn added, if the church's military forces hadn't suffered such a devastating blow that day, the old king would never have had the chance to get his hooks into their high command. After the great reshuffling, he not only weakened the church's power, but also managed to install his own son in their ranks. Evelyn paused, watching Leo's expression grow darker. Anyway, she concluded, since that day, the name Calamity, which has become a synonym for terror. She shrugged. If I hadn't heard all this, just from that letter she wrote you, you'd never guess she was that kind of person. Leo let out a long sigh. If all this was true, Tilly had changed far too much in 4 years. During his first playthrough, the witch had been reclusive and melancholic, radiating negative energy. But in his eyes, she'd still had principles. She was completely absorbed in her magical research, trying to solve the centuries-old affliction of madness that plagued all mages. Because of that, she always had heavy, dark circles under her eyes and looked perpetually exhausted. She would lean against him anywhere, anytime, yawning before silently drifting off to sleep. Sometimes, when she woke up, she would have the most dazed, adorable expression. Back then, despite her high rank, she never involved herself in worldly affairs, remaining indifferent to the internal squabbles between the different schools of thought within the order. But now, it seemed she had unified those factions, an incredibly impressive feat. The Order of Magical Arcanists had a history stretching back thousands of years, with numerous internal cliques and deep-seated disagreements. There were those dedicated solely to researching the truths of magic, and those who wanted to restore the glory of the ancient Magus Imperium. Within that latter group, you had extremists who wanted to wipe out all non-magic humans, and more moderate ones who could coexist, so long as humans served as slaves for food and labor. Every last one of them was a world-class psychopath. The more Leo thought about it, the more his head ached. Seeing him silent, Evelyn shrugged and walked over to arrange the various spoils from her shopping trip. There was a floral sundress with a southern coastal vibe, but the rest was mostly food, all sorts of seafood products. Compared to the worried faces of Leo and Helena, she really did look like she was on vacation. "You certainly know how to enjoy yourself," Helena muttered, glancing from Evelyn to the silent Leo. "Brother, if that which is so dangerous, maybe we should just go back and spend another 3 days and nights on a train?" Evelyn interjected coolly. Helena's face paled. She covered her mouth, looking like she was about to be sick again. But even so, she desperately didn't want her brother to meet that witch. After a monumental internal struggle, she looked back at Leo. "We could walk back." "Yes, we'll treat it like a hiking trip." Leo looked at her earnest little face and quietly shook his head. "We're already here." As the night deepened, Helena, already unwell, drifted back into a groggy sleep. Leo tucked her in and quietly closed the door to her room. Back in his own room, just as he was about to wash up, the ring on his right hand began to glow with a mysterious magical light. A moment later, a cool, pleasant voice filled the in-room. "Why are you still awake so late? Are you thinking of me?" Leo turned in surprise. Ophelia's translucent figure had appeared nearby, a gentle smile on her face. "Are you doing bed checks now?" Leo shook his head, a smile playing on his own lips. "I was just about to go to sleep. I'm about to rest as well. I suddenly missed you, so I thought I'd come see you." Leo smiled back at her. He could see not just Ophelia, but a small, faint portion of her surroundings, the nearly transparent interior of a tent. She must be in an outdoor camp. Ophelia had left 5 days before him, dispatched by the Emperor on a mission. She had to travel day and night to Antiochus, a strategic northern city, to visit the ancestral tomb of the Wigner royal family. At their pace, she should have just about arrived. Now, one of them was in the south, the other in the north, talking across nearly the entire length of the empire. It felt like a long-distance couple on a video call across oceans, and a pang of warmth touched his heart. "It must be pretty cold where you are, right? Is your mission going smoothly?" For a rare moment, Ophelia let a hint of complaint slip into her voice. "Any further north, and we'll be in the northern snowfields. It is quite cold." Thankfully, Carolyn packed enough warm clothes. As for the mission, she shook her head and glanced outside her tent. "The mountainside has collapsed here. We're looking for a way down. The situation is a bit complicated." Ophelia had shared some classified information with him before. Leo knew this was something the old king took very seriously, and it could be extremely dangerous. He patiently advised her not to do everything herself, to let Carolyn and the Shadow Guard handle it. I know. Why are you getting so naggy?" Ophelia's tone was impatient, but her smile only grew wider. "Let's not talk about this. The magic stored in the ring is powerful, but we can't waste it so carelessly. It has more important uses." She sounded like she was about to end the call. "After I go down, I might be out of contact for a while. Don't you go cozying up with that woman while I'm gone. I've already secretly told Helena to keep an eye on you. You'd better behave." Leo nodded with a smile, remembering the day she came to say goodbye. She had pulled Helena aside at the old mansion and whispered with her for a while. So that's what it was about. He never thought those two, who were always at odds, would actually form a united front. Just as Ophelia's spectral image began to fade, a notification suddenly popped up. "Side quest. The Dragon Tomb of Antiochus, there's a side quest?" Leo froze. "Wait." Just as Ophelia's form was about to vanish, Leo's voice brought her back into focus. "What is it?" she asked, walking closer as she noticed the strange expression on his face. A deep blue glow enveloped Leo's features. He looked at her translucent body, lost in thought. He hadn't expected a side quest to appear at this exact moment. Typically, side quests were directly related to the main storyline of the current chapter. Yet this one, the Dragon Tomb of Antiochus, was thousands of miles away in the north, seemingly having nothing to do with his main quest in the coastal town of Hegris. But the system didn't make mistakes. Leo's brow furrowed. There had to be a connection between the two. Suddenly, he remembered the intelligence Evelyn had brought back. She'd said that the Order of Magical Arcanists and Tilly were stirring up trouble all over the country, even the entire northern continent. But the information was too scarce. He still didn't know what they were up to. Perhaps a face-to-face meeting with Tilly could help him unravel the threads from the tangled mess of clues. Side quest. The Dragon Tomb of Antaeus. Delve into the depths and investigate the ancestral tomb of the Wigner royal family. Find the source of the strange sound. Leo read the quest description again, then looked at Ophelia with a serious expression. There was a major problem deep within the Dragon Tomb. It was possible one of her ancient ancestors had decided to stop playing dead. This was no small matter. If it wasn't handled properly and the truth got out, that the Wigner royals were monsters, the very foundation of their family's rule would be shaken. No wonder Ophelia's father was in such a hurry. The old king was a man who craved power, so much so that he'd ruthlessly suppressed New Haven's new money industrialists before they could even rise. He would undoubtedly want to stamp out a potential disaster in his own family crypt at its source. But Leo didn't care about the old king's problems. Since this was a quest, the danger level was sure to be high. He was worried Ophelia would be in peril. After you go down, if you encounter any danger, you have to contact me immediately. Don't worry about using the magic stored in the ring. I'm practically immortal here. I won't need your magical shield. And if you run into a powerful enemy, just run. Forget the damn mission, and forget what your father wants. Leo patiently instructed her. I know, Ophelia saw that he was just getting started and let out a little laugh. Why are you getting so fussy? You sound more like my father than Charlton does. Am I really that much trouble in your eyes? Leo frowned, disapproving. It felt like she hadn't heard a word he'd said. Don't worry, Ophelia's eyes were filled with a smile that wouldn't fade. Before, I might not have ranked among the top-tier supernaturals, but now I've been contained by you. I can unleash the full power of the Dreamlands without worrying about the backlash. Seeing his face still creased with concern, she reminded him, have you forgotten the power I displayed at the estate that day? Now that the Dreamlands can freely interfere with reality, there are very few beings in this world who can completely overpower me. Seeing her proud demeanor, Leo couldn't help but remember the dark, apocalyptic scene at the estate. And that was her before. After being contained, without any restraints, she was probably absurdly powerful. He shook his head and chuckled. Most beings feared the very idea of containment. Even Helena had hesitated for a long time, mentally preparing herself before daring to step back into the old mansion. But Ophelia? She'd practically begged him to contain her, without a shred of fear. Speaking of containment, Leo suddenly recalled that day, the day she left to say goodbye. It had been utter chaos. Of course, the chaos wasn't caused by Ophelia, but by Helena and Evelyn. A fleet of 5 black carriages had pulled up to the mansion, and Ophelia had swept in with her entourage of servants carrying bags and boxes. She had stood in the living room like the lady of the manor, issuing orders, finding fault with everything, and declaring that the entire dilapidated mansion needed a complete renovation to meet her standards as the esteemed 5th princess. Then, the coffee table piled high with Evelyn's snacks had been unceremoniously tossed out, infuriating the vampire. Helena was even angrier, because when Ophelia's people were tidying up Leo's room, they announced that it would soon be the master and mistress's bridal suite and needed to be properly prepared. It felt less like Leo was containing her and more like she was containing him. In the end, it took Leo an eternity of placating to get the princess to leave. Helena had been left grinding her teeth, vowing to team up with the witch to eliminate Ophelia first. Recalling all this, Leo's smile became more helpless. He looked at the Ophelia before him and reminded her one last time. Just be safe. This time, Ophelia didn't rebel. She just looked at him deeply and nodded. It's getting late. I should go. You get some rest. With that, she stepped forward. The blue fluorescence washed over Leo's face as the translucent Ophelia gently pecked him on the corner of his mouth. A good night kiss. It was a kiss that had crossed thousands of miles. Though he felt no physical touch, his heart felt a little warmer. He looked up at her. She gave him a playful wink, and her image dissolved into the air. Leo stared at the spot where she had vanished for a moment, then returned to the washroom. Afterward, with a faint smile, he got into bed. Read the newspaper. Lights out. On the morning of their 3rd day in Porta Brughi, just as the sky was beginning to lighten, the driver who had been promised 10 times his fare was already waiting at the inn's entrance. Evelyn looked at Leo in surprise. She hadn't thought any driver would dare make the trip to that town. She was amazed to find someone who wasn't afraid of death. But as the driver helped them with their luggage, and they got a good look at his gear, Both Leo and Evelyn had to fight back a disbelieving laugh. The man had a crucifix from the Order of the Holy Edict hanging around his neck, along with a collection of other mysterious-looking protective charms. Strapped to his back was an old-fashioned double-barreled shotgun, and a large machete hung at his waist. He was armed to the teeth. "Let's get this straight," the driver said to Leo solemnly. "I'm taking you to the edge of town, and that's it. I'm not going in. If anything happens to you after that, it's got nothing to do with me." "Don't worry," Leo said, waving a hand dismissively. "We're more than capable. You just get us on the road." Once they arrived, he mused. It was anyone's guess whether the townspeople or his group would be the ones in trouble. Of course, he didn't say that out loud. Once they were aboard, the carriage rattled out of the coastal city of Port of Brugge, heading steadily east. As the paved road gave way to dirt, the ride grew bumpier. The journey was much shorter than the one from New Haven, but by carriage, it would still take a full 2 days. The long, jostling trip passed with Evelyn sunbathing on the roof, Helena sleeping soundly in Leo's arms, and Leo himself killing time by studying magic. Evelyn had told him that the prerequisite for learning circle magic was an innate magical perception, a talent Leo lacked. So she'd suggested another idea. Start by understanding the most mainstream form, crystal magic. It was common knowledge that as a supernatural's power grew, so did the risk of backlash and madness. Mages were no exception. Some clever mages had started inscribing magical sigils on naturally occurring magic stones, now standardized as Ethereum crystals. This way, as long as one understood the principles of the sigil structure, they could cast spells with a simple incantation. It was a super simple, foolproof form of magic. The logic was sound. By removing the human medium and entrusting the magic entirely to the stone, one could avoid the backlash. After all, a stone doesn't have a brain, so it can't go insane. The only problem was it took the soul out of magic. A mage who relied on props was hardly a mage at all. And indeed, after this relatively safe crystal magic became popular, the world's entire system of magic had regressed. The only place likely to have preserved the orthodox magical traditions was the Order of Magical Arcanists. Time slipped by as he studied magic and flipped through Gould's grimoire. On the second day of their journey down the country roads, Leo noticed the scenery growing more desolate. Vast stretches of rocky beaches appeared, and a cold sea wind began to blow, causing the temperature to plummet. Evelyn let out a series of sneezes and scrambled down from the roof, complaining that she hadn't worn enough layers. "We're so far south. Why is it so cold here? How bizarre." "We're almost there," the driver called from the front. Leo immediately opened the window and leaned out. In the distance, he could see the silhouette of Hegra's town. It was much larger than he had imagined, sprawling all the way to the distant coastline. It was also exceptionally dilapidated. The buildings on the outskirts were in worse shape than the tenements in New Haven's warrens. Many were just roofless ruins. Though smoke curled from a few chimneys, proving someone still lived there, every door was shut tight and the streets were completely empty. Coupled with the overcast coastal sky, the entire town radiated a deathly stillness. The carriage slowed to a stop. The driver pulled the reins tight, not daring to let the horses get any closer. He stared nervously at the town entrance, as if expecting some terrifying monster to burst out. "Quick, hurry up. I gotta get out of here. I'm not staying in this place a second longer." After Leo, Evelyn, and Helena disembarked with their small leather suitcases, the driver wheeled the carriage around, cracked his whip, and galloped away without a backward glance. Evelyn watched the retreating carriage and pursed her lips before being the first to walk toward Hegra's town. "Looks like people still live here. We might even find an inn." Leo followed behind, holding Helena's hand. The three of them walked at a steady pace, from the deserted town entrance all the way to the wide main road in the center of town. It was there they finally saw a living person. It was a man, smoking a cigarette while squatting and mending a fishing net. As the trio appeared on the street, he happened to look up, even though the old newspaper had described the townspeople's grotesque appearance. Seeing it for the first time was still jarringly ugly. The fisherman's head was strangely shaped with very little hair. His nose was flat, and his eyes were larger than normal. Large because they were bulging and protuberant. The skin on either side of his neck was gathered in disgusting folds and wrinkles, and his complexion was a pallid gray, like a corpse left out too long. The collection of features, so utterly inhuman, was enough to cause a physical sense of discomfort. Leo thought a furry monster would have been easier on the eyes. As Leo observed the fisherman, the man stared back, his eyes fixed on the three of them, unblinking and silent. Evelyn, a sucker for a pretty face down to her core, had always detested ugliness. Seeing his stare, a look of revulsion crossed her face. Leo saw the faint glow of blood-red light forming in her hand and quietly took her arm. "Hold on, Professor. Don't do anything yet." He scanned their surroundings warily. It wasn't just the fishermen staring. From the houses around them, drawn curtains were being pulled slightly aside. From the alleys between buildings came furtive sounds. Leo could feel countless eyes fixed on them, and the atmosphere grew increasingly eerie. After walking a short distance down the main road, Leo spotted a few open shops, including an inn. He and Evelyn exchanged a look and walked toward it without a word. He pushed open the inn's old wooden door. With a strange creak, he found the inside was exceptionally dim, with a damp, musty smell. "Looking for a room?" a hoarse voice suddenly rasped. The flickering lamplight illuminated half of the innkeeper's face. He was even uglier than the fisherman outside. After speaking, the innkeeper's gaze fell upon the three of them. His stare was just as peculiar as the others. It wasn't a look of waiting for a reply, but one of observation, identical to that of the townspeople outside. "Yes, a room," Leo said, meeting his gaze. "Just one." This wasn't poor Brugge. For safety, it was better to stick together. "Oh." The innkeeper studied them for another long moment before finally looking away and rummaging around on the counter. "Single rooms. One bed or two beds?" "There are 3 of you." Helena, holding Leo's hand, immediately spoke up. "That's fine. I'll sleep in the same bed as my brother." Leo nodded. The innkeeper gave the 2 of them a strange look. Finally, he nodded, his voice still the same grating rasp like an old radio. "All right. Room is on the 4th floor. Follow me." As Leo walked up the old staircase, the wooden planks groaned precariously. He watched the innkeeper's hunched back and decided to test the waters. The people in town don't seem to welcome outsiders. At his words, the innkeeper paused. He slowly turned his head, his hideous eyes locking onto Leo. "How could that be? We here in Hegra's town have always been known for our hospitality. They're just sick, that's all. That's why they look strange. Don't mind them, guests." Hospitality? Leo thought of all the terrifying legends about the town and the sinister, ill-intentioned stares from the townspeople. He let out a short laugh. "What kind of hospitality exactly? Are you planning a welcoming ceremony for us?" He didn't expect the innkeeper to actually nod. "Of course." He grinned, revealing a grotesque smile. "Tonight, there's a special bonfire performance just for you outsiders." At 9 o'clock, the seaside town was cloaked in a dead, black night. Inside the 4th-floor room of the inn, Leo sat at a table, quietly reading a grimoire by the glow of a gas lamp. A few Ethereum crystals for his research were laid out beside him. Helena stood by the window, vigilantly monitoring the town's movements. Her shoulders were tense. She'd been on edge all evening, sensing that something was about to happen tonight. "Brother, why isn't she back yet?" Helena asked, her voice laced with worry. Leo closed his book and offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. The night is the professor's home turf. As long as she doesn't want to be found, no one will spot her in the dark." Helena nodded silently. She trusted Evelyn's abilities, but her small face was still etched with anxiety. By contrast, Leo was much calmer, even in the mood to continue his research on crystal magic. He had, after all, dispatched his top scout. Evelyn, as a veteran vampire, was far more adept at reconnaissance in the dark than he was. There was no need for him to get in the way. All he had to do now was wait patiently. He waited a little longer. After a while, a crimson shadow flickered past, and Evelyn gracefully vaulted in through the open window. The movement was nearly silent, as nimble as a cat. The moment she landed, Leo and Helena turned to her. "Well?" Leo asked. Evelyn gently closed the window and drew the curtains tight, then looked at Leo with a frown. "Those townspeople are nocturnal. There are many times more of them out at night than during the day. It's swarming with them out there, and they've blocked all the roads into town. They don't intend to let us leave." Helena's voice was puzzled. What are these shady characters trying to do? Maybe they want to kill us to keep their secret. Maybe they want to scare us off, Leo shrugged. From the rumors about Hegra's town, the locals here have been deliberately hiding something. After all, the town had been officially removed from administrative maps. To outsiders, it was uninhabited, but in reality, they had been living here secretly for the past decade. The unlucky souls who stumbled and rarely made it out, leaving behind nothing but bizarre legends. No one knew what had really happened here, which proved just how effective the townspeople were at keeping secrets. As they were talking, Evelyn's nose suddenly twitched. She frowned and looked at Leo. I smell something strange. She immediately went to the window and pulled the curtain back just a crack. The three of them saw it at the same time. In the distance, at the town center, a massive bonfire had been lit. Scores of townspeople holding torches were gathered around it, their dark, hunched silhouettes flickering in the firelight. Evelyn sniffed the air again. She was highly sensitive to such smells. It's the smell of burnt corpses. Leo gazed at the distant, blazing fire. So, this was the innkeeper's bonfire performance to welcome outsiders. Except the unlucky outsiders were part of the bonfire itself. Just as the three of them were peering out, every townsperson on the street below suddenly, unnervingly, looked up at them. Their ugly faces were all shadowed with sinister expressions. Being watched by so many pairs of eyes created an incredibly creepy atmosphere. Evelyn's expression darkened. She turned, her sharp gaze fixed on the room's door. "They're coming." The words had barely left her mouth when a chaotic stampede of footsteps echoed from downstairs. There were a lot of them. They quickly surrounded the door, and the locked entrance began to shudder under violent blows. At the same time, a sickening crawling sound scraped against the walls below their fourth-floor window. The townspeople had them completely surrounded. Leo's expression remained unchanged. He looked at Evelyn and Helena, who both nodded silently. The moment the door burst open, flickering torchlight illuminated a flood of grotesque figures brandishing pitchforks, harpoons, and shotguns. A howling townsman charged straight at Leo. Unflustered, Leo casually raised the cane he always carried, elegantly parrying the man's pitchfork before bringing the cane down on his head. In an instant, the man's head imploded, splattering red and white across the wall. The result surprised not only Evelyn, but Leo himself. He hadn't expected the low-level Bartitsu skill to be so devastating. On second thought, while the martial art was effective, the brutal outcome was thanks to the 20 attribute points he'd received in the second chapter, most of which he had dumped into strength. Investigator, Leo, sterling attributes. Strength, 50, Constitution, 25, Agility, 50, Charisma, 100, Insight, 49, Sanity, 45. When an attribute reached around 50, the improvement was almost qualitative. Leo weighed the light wooden cane in his hand and suddenly wished it was made of iron. That would be even more savage. Leo moved with nimble grace, dodging the townspeople's attacks and methodically striking their heads one by one. The initial wave of intruders was quickly cut down. Watching this, Evelyn felt she might not even be needed. "You're getting quite formidable." She pulled open the curtain and looked down at the swarm of townspeople below, her eyes glinting with a thirst for slaughter. A loud gunshot shattered the chandelier. The townsman's double-barreled shotgun had been aimed at Leo, but Leo's command mode had already locked onto him. The instant the command was given, one of Helena's black tentacles pierced the man's chest, causing the gun to fire wildly. Under Leo's command, Helena systematically targeted those with firearms, neutralizing their firepower advantage despite their superior numbers. The thick smell of blood filled the room. Mutilated bodies lay strewn across the floor. The townspeople, who had initially held the advantage in numbers, suddenly realized that the three outsiders in the room were far more difficult to handle than they had imagined. So, they changed their tactics. The townspeople's inhumanly ugly heads all turned toward the night sky. As if in a ritual, they let out a unified, monstrous howl, a barrage of ear-splitting psychic assault that made one's heart pound. Sanity check in progress. Sanity -5, sanity -5. Leo fought to control his increasingly chaotic thoughts, his cold gaze fixed on one ugly figure in the crowd, the innkeeper. The man was staring back, a sinister, hideous grin plastered on his face. Leo spoke to him silently. "Nice welcoming ceremony. Hegra's town really is hospitable." But a cold smile spread across Leo's face. Then, suddenly, his entire visage began to distort. The innkeeper's smile vanished, his eyes widening as if he were seeing something truly horrific. The young man's head was melting like a wax candle, his eyes sliding down and drifting back up, his mouth stretching wider and wider to an impossible degree. His facial features rearranged themselves into a grotesque collage, and his body began to twist, gradually taking on the form of an unspeakable monster. Then, a wave of psychic assault far more chilling than the townspeople's collective shriek was unleashed. Every townsman clutched their head, screaming in terror, their minds shattered, all capacity for rational thought gone. The twisted, monstrous version of Leo took slow, deliberate steps toward the ashen-faced innkeeper. Black claws lifted the man into the air. Leo grinned grotesquely, thinking how simple Helena's abilities seemed, but when combined, they were unbelievably effective. He held the mentally broken innkeeper aloft and cast a cold gaze over the ugly townspeople. You may look terrifying, but we are far, far more terrifying than you. Helena, free attack mode. Evelyn, free attack mode. Leo glanced back at them. Evelyn's eyes were glowing with a bloodlust she could no longer contain. She summoned her blood-red scythe, shattered the window, and leapt down into the crowd below with a triumphant laugh. Tonight, the slaughter began. As the night faded, the morning sun hung cold and distant behind a thick blanket of clouds over the coast. The sea wind was still biting. Compared to the chaos of the previous night in Hegra's town, a small fishing village 10 kilometers away was eerily quiet. A young woman in a dark brown, hooded cloak brushed a strand of black hair, tossed loose by the wind, from her face. She gazed at the silhouette of the town in the far distance. A fog had rolled in off the sea, making the outlines of Hegra's hazy and indistinct. Still, the woman's deep purple eyes remained fixed on that spot for a long, long time before she finally looked away. Carrying a basket for gathering herbs, she returned to a small wooden cabin by the sea. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth. A rare ray of sunlight streamed through the window, falling across a cabinet filled with bottles and jars. Opposite the cabinet, an old wooden table served as an alchemy station, covered with brass scales, a crucible, parchment scrolls filled with formulas, a quill pen, and various magical ingredients. A potion bubbled in a nearby cauldron, filling the room with a pungent, strange medicinal smell. The woman pulled back her hood. The sunlight touched her face, revealing delicate features on a pale complexion. Her skin was wan, and the dark circles under her eyes gave her a perpetually exhausted look, as if she hadn't had a proper rest in a very long time. With the window open, the damp, cold sea air drifted in, chilling the room. After setting down her basket of herbs, the woman glanced at the hearth. With a soft snap of her fingers, the fire roared back to life, warming the room once more. You use second circle magic for that. Can't you just close the window? A teasing voice came from the doorway. An older woman in a black robe walked into the cabin. The younger woman glanced at her before returning to her work. I like fresh air. The sea breeze is nice. The older woman walked over, her curiosity piqued, and looked at the herbs she had just brought back. Is this the heart of a deep-sea leviathan, the blood of a highborn vampire, a ghoul's tooth, a flame petal from a snowy mountain cliff, saltpeter, sulfur, charcoal? The older woman stared in astonishment. These are the herbs you went out to gather? What in the world are you making? The young woman shook her head slightly. Just a small research project. Seeing the older woman still standing there, waiting for an explanation, she sighed. The church's weapons have become more and more advanced over the years. I thought perhaps we should update our own arsenal. She proceeded to explain the structural principles of a magical sigil, leaving the older woman gasping in admiration. As expected of you. If a weapon like this were successfully deployed, it would probably drive an entire city mad in an instant. It's not quite that severe, the young woman demurred. Only half a city. The older woman's mouth fell open. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, a wry smile touched her lips. My dear President Tilly, next time you go out to gather herbs, could you perhaps let me know? I thought you were just taking a walk on a beach. How was I to know your trip involved killing so many dangerous monsters? You are our only hope. Please never act so recklessly again and put yourself in danger. A faint smile touched Tilly's lips. After she finished processing the herbs, she yawned and settled into a rocking chair by the bookshelf. She habitually picked up a stack of newspapers, reading while she waited for the potion in the cauldron to react, a weary fatigue settling over her features. President Tilly, the older woman said with a frown, please leave these things to us in the future. You have a more important mission. Before that, maintaining your health is paramount. Tilly looked up, a hint of helplessness in her smile. Elder Marjorie, you don't need to be so formal with me. Just call me by my name. And I'm not the president, I'm the vice president. No. Elder Marjorie shook her head. That so-called president has always been arrogant and reckless. The Council of Elders has been dissatisfied with him for a long time. Once this business is over, and he is dead, I will nominate you as the new president of the Order of Magical Arcanists. Killing him won't be easy. Besides, I'm not as exceptional as you say, Tilly said with a small smile. Of course you are. Elder Marjorie's expression suddenly turned serious, her eyes unwavering. Ever since our ancestors' homeland was destroyed, Magic itself has been cursed. All our colleagues who dared to seek the world's truths have been driven mad for no reason. We fell from the heavens where we once looked down upon all creation. Mages, we were once such a proud people. We were the embodiment of knowledge, tirelessly pursuing truth. We were omnipotent, revered by all. And now, hatred filled Marjorie's eyes. What do they call us? Dark wizards, vile witches who beguile the hearts of men, the culprits who spread plague and panic, evil heretics who should be burned at the stake. Seeing Marjorie's growing agitation, Tilly simply set down her newspaper and watched her silently, as if this had happened many times before. The calmness in those purple eyes seemed to break Marjorie's fervor, and her emotions finally subsided. She looked at Tilly deeply, her voice filled with awe. In the entire 1,000-year history of the Order, you are the only one who has never suffered a backlash. Not only that, you achieved successive promotions in just a few short years. You're only 20, and yet you're already on par with us old fossils who have lived for centuries. You are a true genius. Tilly listened to Elder Marjorie's praise, but her face showed no trace of the expected joy. She slowly picked up the newspaper again, her eyes fixed on a front-page story. Marjorie's words still hung in the air, but Tilly was just silently looking at the young man's photograph, her thoughts drifting far away. Am I a genius? Perhaps. But the reason I don't suffer from backlash isn't because of some extraordinary talent. It's because... Tilly gently stroked the face of the young man in the newspaper, over and over again. She must have done it so many times that the photograph was now slightly blurred. Her 2 promotions had both happened 4 years ago, both because of Leo. Within the Order, she might be seen as a genius, a miracle. But only Tilly herself knew that the real miracle was him. He was the gift the gods had bestowed upon her. Marjorie's irritating voice droned on. Tilly's expression remained unchanged, her calm, purple eyes slowly turning to her. Tilly, you are a genius, a true genius. You are the only hope for our Order to restore the glory of the ancient Magus Imperium. She stared intently at Tilly in the rocking chair, clearly displeased that she was still looking at the newspaper. You've been reading that same paper for days. Don't you ever get tired of it? What on earth is in there that's worth your attention? Stop focusing on such trivial matters. Once I deal with the president, once the council can devote all its resources to you, you can finally focus on your research. I look forward to your future. Our great cause will be realized. Marjorie seemed lost in a beautiful vision of the future, her expression fanatical, her body trembling with excitement. Tilly watched Elder Marjorie silently. In her purple eyes, a barely perceptible emotion flickered. Disgust, or perhaps weariness. The unimaginable pressure, the endless, fruitless research. It was suffocating her. She lowered her gaze, forcing the revulsion down, and looked back at the photograph in the newspaper. Only in reminiscing about the time she spent with him could her heart find a rare moment of peace. Tilly stared at the young man in the photo, her purple gaze deepening. A small smile touched her lips. Soon, all of this will be over soon, she thought happily. Back in Hegra's town, though daylight had returned, the bonfire in the town center still burned fiercely. Grotesque bodies were scattered across the main road. The chaos of the previous night was long over. Leo walked up to the fire, yawning, and scanned the town with weary eyes. Hegra's had returned to the deathly stillness he had first encountered. Every door was shut, every curtain drawn. The surviving townspeople were hiding in their homes, peeking through cracks in doors and curtains, their faces masks of unspeakable terror as they watched Leo and his companions. They were afraid. Leo surveyed the scene, and when he saw their terrified gazes, he couldn't help but smile. Last night, the 3 of them had brutally fought off the entire town. The state they had been in was a far better fit for the description of terrifying monsters than these townspeople were. Evelyn's eyes held a look of disdain. After hearing all those legends, I thought this town would be truly frightening. Is this all they've got? The large, blood-red scythe in her hand dissolved into the air. She then looked at Leo. How was my performance last night? She asked with a grin. Leo nodded silently. You were incredible, Professor. You even scared me. Last night, Evelyn had been like a goddess of slaughter. Her bloodthirsty gaze had enveloped the entire town in a crimson terror. The power she had displayed had far exceeded Leo's expectations. The reason for that was Evelyn race, vampire, rank, viscount, affinity, 82 corruption, 20 Professor Evelyn had suddenly been promoted last night from a baroness to a viscountess. Her mastery of blood magic had risen to a whole new level. Ever since that time we went downtown, I felt like I was on the verge of a breakthrough. Evelyn looked at Leo curiously. What kind of magic aura do you have, little Leo? Whether it's that what you mentioned or me, why are our promotion speeds so incredibly fast? She fell into thought. Her last promotion had been 20 years ago. Though her talent was the best in her clan, based on the cultivation speeds of the old monsters in her family, she had conservatively estimated it would take another 10 years to become a Viscountess. Then she met Leo, and in such a short time, she had touched upon a higher realm of blood magic. Leo shook his head, not explaining why. The reason was actually quite simple. Their team had been tackling in-game level dungeons from the start. In his first playthrough, Chapter 1 and 2 had involved catching a serial killer or maybe a ghoul. This time around, they'd already encountered vassals of outer gods, and even an outer god itself. It would have been weirder if their leveling speed wasn't fast. Her promotion had made Evelyn smug and boastful. She instinctively glanced at Helena with a provocative look. She still remembered vividly how Helena's massive tentacle had instantly defeated her during their battle at the estate. She had never accepted that loss and was always looking for a chance for a rematch. Feeling Evelyn's challenging gaze, Helena pursed her lips and ignored her. In her normal state, she was no match for the vampire. Her previous victory was due to corruption and backlash, which had transformed her into that hideous, terrifying creature. She never wanted to become that ugly monster in front of her brother again. "You like to fight, huh?" Helena said coolly. "If you like fighting so much, go fight the witch. If you can beat her, then I'll be impressed." Evelyn paused, then subconsciously looked at Leo. Leo laughed and said bluntly, "Don't even think about it, Professor. You can't beat her. Do you have to be so blunt?" Evelyn shot him a wounded look. "You could have at least hesitated. Can't you give your professor some face?" So Leo lowered his head, a thoughtful frown on his face. He studied Evelyn for a long moment, giving her the courtesy of a detailed analysis. Well, after extensive data analysis, I've concluded that you probably really can't beat her." Oh, Evelyn's shoulders slumped, and she finally dropped the subject. But a deep curiosity was growing inside her. She desperately wanted to know just how powerful that witch really was. While they were talking, they had already checked the area. There were no more threats. Leo squatted by the bonfire and poked it with his cane, revealing the charred remains of human skeletons. He looked up at the innkeeper, who they had trussed up and hung from a pole. "You burned all these outsiders? Why do you hate outsiders so much?" The innkeeper's eyes, so bulged they looked ready to pop out, were shot with blood. They blazed with hatred. "Damn you, wizards! Demons! I curse you for what you've done, Yul." As he screamed curses, a black tentacle shot out and wrapped tightly around his neck. "My brother is asking you a question," Helena said coldly. "Answer him honestly if you don't want to die." After she released the tentacle, the innkeeper gasped for air, cold sweat pouring down his face. But when he looked at Leo again, the venom in his eyes hadn't diminished. "Blasphemous dark wizards! You demons! You will be cursed and go to hell for your deeds." Hearing this, Evelyn frowned slightly, casting a thoughtful look at Leo. Helena didn't think too deeply about it. She just assumed he was cursing her brother and was about to use her tentacles to toss him into the fire, so he could enjoy the same fate as the other outsiders. "Wait a minute," Leo said, suddenly catching something unusual. "Blasphemous? You're surprisingly devout. Which god do you worship?" He walked over and prodded the man's neck with his cane, examining it closely. The main reason the townspeople were so ugly was that they were no longer fully human, having developed amphibious features. The folds on their necks concealed organs that resembled fish gills. The god they worshipped had to be some entity from the sea. Otherwise, they wouldn't look like this. "The great sea god, of course," the innkeeper snorted. "Which sea god are you talking about?" Evelyn pressed immediately. The innkeeper sneered at them. "The sea god is the sea god, the great master of the ocean. Who else could it be?" Leo and Evelyn exchanged a puzzled look. Both were well-read in history and occult lore, and they knew that coastal peoples all over the world had legends of sea gods. But the image of a sea god was never uniform. There were almost always different entities. And as far as Leo knew, there was no true sea god in this world. But no matter how they questioned him, or the other captured townspeople, they couldn't get any more information. It seemed they truly just worshipped the sea god, the sole master of the ocean, with no name and no title. Leo gave up on that line of questioning. These ignorant townspeople probably didn't even know what they were worshipping. He asked another question. "Why do you call us wizards?" "We're not wizards. From the way you're talking, did a group of wizards come here and do something bad before? You're not wizards?" The innkeeper's expression was one of pure shock, as if he couldn't believe it. "We're just ordinary supernaturals," Leo said calmly. "Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking you these things. If you answer me honestly, I might consider letting you live." The innkeeper didn't seem to grasp the difference between a wizard and a supernatural. He just sank into a deep confusion, muttering to himself. "So, they're really not the same wizards from before? That's strange. Then what are you doing here?" Leo shrugged. "We're on vacation." "Vacation?" The innkeeper looked as if he'd misheard. "You came to a place like this for vacation? What's wrong with that?" Leo's lips curled into a cold smile. His face began to twist and contort, and a powerful psychic assault emanated from him. The innkeeper let out a terrified shriek, nearly fainting from fear. "Answer my questions. I'm running out of patience," Leo said with a horrifying grin. All right. I'll answer you. I'll answer. Please, just stop smiling." Leo nodded, gradually letting his smile, which had stretched to the back of his head, recede. The terrified innkeeper finally breathed a sigh of relief. This young man seemed even more terrifying than the wizards from before. Under Leo's interrogation, the innkeeper finally revealed what had happened to the town. It all started 15 years ago. At first, Hegres was extremely poor. Overfishing had depleted the nearby waters, and the people lived in abject poverty. But then, at some point, the townspeople began to worship a god from the sea. This god was unlike the divine beings from the church. It actually answered the prayers of its followers. It was real. The fishermen were ecstatic. After they started worshiping the sea god, the great deity bestowed upon them abundance and wealth. The fish in the shallow waters became inexhaustibly plentiful, like a miracle. The townspeople, who lived by the sea, acquired wealth beyond their wildest dreams. Their faith grew more fervent, eventually becoming a fanatical religion. What could be better than a god who truly answered prayers and made his followers rich? They didn't even mind that their bodies were slowly mutating, becoming less human and more fish-like. They saw it as a gift from their god. And in a way, their lifespans were extended. The old people in town never died, and some even became as agile as champion swimmers. Of course, the town's sudden wealth couldn't be hidden from the outside world. That, combined with the grotesque appearance of the townspeople and a string of disappearances, led to an investigation by the Port of Brugge City Council. This was the incident Leo had read about in the old newspapers. A violent conflict had erupted, many had died, and the town's cult was supposedly eradicated. But you can't burn out a wildfire completely. A few townspeople had hidden in the sea and escaped. For the next 10 years, they lived here in secret, becoming even more insular and hostile toward outsiders. To ensure no news got out, the wealthy townspeople even infiltrated the city council, which was why both sides had left each other alone for all these years. But their good days finally came to an end. The change happened 6 months ago. A group of powerful and terrifying wizards stormed into the town and headed for the coast. No one knew what they were doing, but the people hated them with a passion because after they came, the fishing industry that was their livelihood vanished. After that, not only were there no more opportunities to get rich, but even simple survival became a struggle. The land grew barren. Nothing would grow. Food became scarce. The townspeople's bodies began to degenerate, and more of them went mad. The place became like a cursed, blighted land. And when the townspeople tried to flee, they were horrified to discover they couldn't leave. The moment they left this land, left this town, they would die. Their bodies would wither into terrifying, desiccated corpses. They were truly cursed. And the reason for all of it was because the day the wizards came, the corpse of their god had washed ashore. The god was dead. It must have been those wizards. They killed our god. And now the god's vengeful spirit lingers over the coast, and it has laid a curse of punishment upon us. The innkeeper shrieked hysterically. Everyone has to die. The god is punishing us for our sins. Those wizards and you too. You'll all die. Ha ha. Leo, Evelyn, and Helena listened to his story, their faces filled with utter shock. The god is dead. Evelyn's eyes widened. Gods can be killed. Leo was thinking about something else. The wizards the innkeeper mentioned had to be members of the Order of Magical Arcanists. He never thought they would be so bold as to go after a god. Whether it was a true god or a false one, the mere thought of deicide was scandalous enough. Leo silently looked toward the sea at the edge of town, a deep confusion settling over him. What did the Order of Magical Arcanists want? Or rather, Tilly, what did you want? At that very moment, in the small wooden cabin 10 kilometers away, Elder Marjorie had long since left. An apprentice in a light-colored robe stood respectfully before Tilly. President Tilly, your friends have arrived in Town. There was a battle in the town last night. Tilly, who was busy at her alchemy station, suddenly paused. He's finally here. She didn't bother asking if Leo had dealt with the townspeople. She knew that such things were no trouble for him at all. Tilly silently put down her alchemy tools. Though her movements were as calm as ever, she knew the experiment was over. Her heart was in turmoil. For 4 years, she had been waiting for this day. But now that it had truly arrived, now that she was about to be reunited with him, she felt a strange sense of bewilderment. Tilly took a deep breath and slowly opened a drawer. Inside were 2 gift boxes, one for him and one for his sister. As she pictured their reunion, a serene smile graced her face. Prepare 2 good rooms in the town for me. He and his sister must be exhausted from their journey. Just as the apprentice was about to agree, Tilly spoke again. Oh, and one more thing. Don't worry about the townspeople. They can't escape, and every one of them is a precious test subject. Don't kill them all. The apprentice nodded. As he was thinking about arranging the rooms, he suddenly said, But President, 3 people arrived. 3 people. Tilly froze for a moment. Then her brow furrowed slightly. The 5th princess of Wigner. The apprentice immediately shook his head. No, it was a female vampire. This time, Tilly showed no surprise. Instead, her eyes narrowed. Oh, it was someone she didn't know. So, a new flame? A cold light glinted in her deep purple eyes. As her emotions shifted abruptly, a strange ripple seemed to pass through Tilly's body. The apprentice thought he was seeing things. His eyes widened. Vice President, your body. It's nothing. Tilly waved a dismissive hand. Go and prepare. Yes. After the apprentice left, Tilly stood there in silence for a long time. Containment again, is it? In that case this time, I'll solve all the problems once and for all. Back in Town, once the interrogation of the innkeeper was over, a red light flashed in Leo's hand. He used blood magic to form a small dagger and cut the ropes binding the man. The innkeeper immediately fell into the bonfire. He yelped and scrambled out, beating at the flames on his clothes. Leo watched him, and the man didn't dare meet his gaze. He just silently went to untie the other townspeople. After the long journey and a sleepless night, Helena let out a heavy yawn. Leo looked at her tired little face and smiled. Let's go back and rest. Get some sleep. We can deal with everything else later. Helena leaned against Leo and nodded obediently. The 3 of them returned to the inn. The owner hadn't dared to come back. After last night, it was unlikely any of them would actively seek trouble again. In their room, Helena fell into a deep sleep. Leo looked at Evelyn, whose expression was serious. I never thought something so incredible had happened in this town. She gazed out the window at the dilapidated town, a worried look in her eyes. Should we contact the outside world? If agents from the Bureau of Special Investigations or a knightly order were here, maybe the Order of Magical Arcanists wouldn't be so reckless. Leo considered it. But this isn't New Haven. It's a remote backwater. And didn't the innkeeper say the higher-ups in Port of Brugge were bribed? Any message we send would probably just disappear. Evelyn thought for a moment. Then a smile broke across her face. Who said New Haven's reach doesn't extend here? Isn't Captain Raymond's on vacation nearby? The thought of Captain Raymond's complaining, exasperated face made Leo chuckle. Looks like the captain's wonderful vacation is about to end. It's his fate. Evelyn giggled, but then her expression turned serious again. About that god's curse, what do you think? Leo's gaze also grew stern. The innkeeper had said that the god's vengeful spirit lingered over the coast, cursing everyone so that no one could leave this land. Anyone who tried would turn into a desiccated corpse. He instinctively recalled the 2 strange rumors he'd heard from the driver when they first arrived in Port Brugge. The first was about a traveler who stayed 1 night a year or 2 ago and went mad after leaving. The second was about a group of merchants who came here not long ago and never left alive. If those stories were true, they fit the timeline of the town's curse perfectly. 6 months ago, people could still leave. After that, anyone who came and died. So we're trapped here. Evelyn looked out at the landscape beyond the town. She didn't seem particularly scared, but as she gazed, she suddenly paused. Hey, didn't he say no one can leave the town? What's that townsman doing? Leo was startled. He quickly went to the window and followed her gaze. Sure enough, he saw someone dressed in townsman's clothes, stealthily climbing the rocky cliffs, trying to leave from the high ground on the town's flank. And the way the person moved was unnatural, clearly a supernatural. Leo and Evelyn exchanged a look. This was getting interesting. Let's go. Let's check it out. 2 crimson shadows vanished from the inn room, racing after the furtive figure. They chased him to the edge of town, where the buildings thinned out and the terrain grew steep and rugged. The main reason for Hegra's town's isolation. Leo and Evelyn watched as the person used a strange movement technique. Each simple step covered a dozen meters, as if he were floating or flying along the cliff face. But Leo and Evelyn were fast too, and they didn't need to be stealthy. As the distance between them closed, the person, as if he had eyes in the back of his head, glanced back, his face hidden in the shadow of his cloak. His voice was hoarse, with a hint of surprise. "Who are you?" Leo stood on the roof of a taller building, level with him. "I was about to ask you the same question." The man's eyes narrowed, quickly sizing up Leo and Evelyn, then glancing toward the coastline. Leo could tell he was clearly hiding from something, but it wasn't the townspeople. The cloaked man said no more. He answered with magic. Leo saw him pull out an Ethereum crystal. An instant later, a blinding blue light erupted. "Leo, watch out!" Evelyn shouted. He didn't need her warning. The moment the man moved, Leo had already leapt off the roof. An instant later, a beam of light with a blue, comet-like tail slammed into the chimney where he had been standing, blasting it into a shower of brick and rubble. But it wasn't over. After Leo landed, the crystal flashed again, and another beam shot toward him. With his 50 agility, Leo moved like a blur, his vampiric abilities leaving a red afterimage on the ground. When he looked back, an entire building had been reduced to a ruin of craters. A cold sweat broke out on Leo's skin. This enemy was a true mage, highly skilled in crystal magic. They had run into a serious opponent. He looked up. Evelyn's blood magic had already reached the cloaked man. She raised a single hand, and crimson blood formed a massive, spreading thicket of twisted thorns in midair, blocking the magical attacks while simultaneously stabbing at the mage from multiple angles. The mage countered every move. Several more Ethereum crystals began to orbit him. His incantation was slightly slower this time, but then a blinding light erupted. Countless magical comets rained down from the sky, a curtain of projectiles screaming toward Evelyn. Evelyn sneered. She floated in the air as a cloud of blood mist burst from her body. The impossibly large volume of blood spread through the air, causing each falling comet to detonate prematurely. The sky rained blood. The mage frowned slightly, surprised that his assault was so easily neutralized. He shot a quick glance at the distant coastline, then turned and fled up the cliff without another word. But Evelyn was faster. A crimson shadow streaked through the air. Wielding her massive blood-red scythe, she swung at his back. The mage's mood soured. He turned, the crystal flashed, and a large sword of glowing blue light appeared in his hand. The instant the scythe and sword collided, the mage's eyes narrowed. Another crystal orbiting him lit up, clearly preparing a new spell. But this time he suddenly froze, his body trembling. The spell failed to cast, because Leo had appeared behind him like a ghost. Psychic assault, a powerful mental shock stabbed into his brain. The mage's face contorted in a snarl, his eyes shot with blood. "Professor," Leo shouted. "Now is the time to strike." Evelyn smirked, and her blood-red scythe swept toward the man's waist. Leo's own attack mirrored hers. The crimson edge in his hand slashed toward the back of the mage's head. At this level of combat, Bartitsu and his revolver were useless. His most powerful attack was still Evelyn's blood magic. Caught in a pincer attack, with the incredible speed of two vampires, the mage had nowhere to run. For a split second, a look of shock crossed his face. But miraculously, their combined attack didn't kill him. With the sharp crack of several Ethereum crystals shattering, a burst of force erupted, blasting both of them away. Evelyn was thrown more than 10 meters. She scrambled to cling to the cliff face, glaring coldly at the mage. Defensive magic. Leo was thrown even farther. Unlike Evelyn, he couldn't hover in midair. He plummeted toward the ground. Just as he was about to hit the ground, a fall that would leave him crippled, if not dead, his skin suddenly darkened. Two arms, now 5 or 6 meters long, reached out and just managed to wrap around the spire of a church. The force of his fall sent a sickening crack through his arms, his muscles tearing. Leo gritted his teeth against the searing pain, holding on tight. His black arms had now become 2 tentacles, wrapped firmly around the building. At the last possible second, his body swung up in a high arc. Landing precariously on the tower's roof, Leo ignored the agony in his arms and immediately looked up. The mage was glaring at them with fury, while constantly glancing toward the sea, his mood seeming both urgent and frustrated. Seeing that he couldn't escape quickly, he apparently decided to deal with the immediate problem first. Leo watched as he sneered. Hundreds of Ethereum crystals appeared in the sky, their blue light outshining the sun. Holy crap, that many. Leo was stunned. Are you cheating? Evelyn had a similar look of astonishment. From the man's enraged expression, it looked like he was throwing his entire magical reserve at them. Leo, she yelled, instinctively rushing toward him. We can't block this. Run. Just as the spells were about to fall, blood surged from Evelyn's body, forming layer after layer of crimson thorns that blotted out the sky. The massive expenditure of magic left her face pale. A giant canopy of light hung over them. Leo and Evelyn vanished from their spot in an instant. Using every ounce of strength, they had to sprint to the other side of town, try to escape the saturation bombing. But then, the spectacular display of magic in the sky didn't immediately unleash its power. The air fell, strangely silent. Leo and Evelyn were now on the town's main road. Seeing that nothing had happened, they exchanged a puzzled look and turned back. What they saw next was even more shocking. A second figure, clad in a dark brown cloak but with a much slimmer build, was floating high in the air. This new mage faced the sky-blotting magical barrage without a hint of fear, their back an unmoving silhouette against the light. Upon the appearance of this mysterious mage, the first one displayed an emotion that could only be described as terror. He immediately redirected his entire arsenal, unleashing it all without reservation at the newcomer. Leo didn't even see the mysterious mage move. Most of the light beams, falling like a meteor shower, simply extinguished mid-flight, as if they had suddenly fizzled out. An angry, unwilling roar echoed through the sky. The remaining beams of light froze in midair. Then, as if they were the mysterious mage's loyal pets, every single spell obediently turned around and shot back toward its original caster. The angry roar was silenced. A blinding blue light exploded in the sky. Hit by so many of his own spells, the caster was instantly annihilated, not even leaving ashes behind. Witnessing this, Evelyn's mouth fell open in shock. What? What was that? The furtive mage who had tried to flee was already a formidable opponent. She and Leo together had struggled to fight him. Yet, against this newcomer, he hadn't even had a chance to fight back before being instantly killed. Evelyn's expression slowly darkened. If this new mage was hostile, they probably wouldn't even have a chance of survival. Leo's expression, however, was even darker than hers, because he already knew who the mage in the sky was. After the battle ended, a sense of panic began to spread through the town. Leo saw Helena running toward them from the direction of the inn. Brother, what happened? She'd only been asleep for a little while, but the sky had changed. What was going on? Oh, is that Helena? A pleasant female voice suddenly echoed from above. You've grown so much, I almost didn't recognize you. Who are you? Helena reached her brother's side and fixed a wary, guarded gaze on the figure slowly descending from the sky. The mysterious mage landed and walked calmly toward them. You. Helena faltered. Evelyn watched her every move, a long, blood-red blade already materialized in her hand. The mage stopped a few meters in front of Leo. From within the wide robe, a pale, slender wrist emerged, and she pulled back her hood. The cold sunlight fell upon her, revealing the beautiful face hidden in the shadows of the cloak. She gazed at Leo, who was now so close, her deep, mysterious purple eyes seeming to hold 1,000 unspoken words. But in the end, she just said softly, "Long time no see." Leo looked back at her and nodded. Tilly, it has been a long time. Helena instinctively tightened her grip on Leo's hand. Evelyn narrowed her eyes, studying the witch before her, the blood-red blade still held at the ready. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Leo looked at her and suddenly smiled. 4 years. Your magic has become even more refined. That move just now, that was a combination of 2 counterspells, wasn't it? Yes. Formula deconstruction and arcane redirection. Tilly nodded, a nostalgic smile on her face as she looked at Leo. Impressive. I'm surprised you could tell. If it weren't for your weak magical aptitude, you would have had a place in the Order of Magical Arcanists long ago. Leo shrugged with a smile. I have no desire to be colleagues with that bunch of psychopaths. If you weren't still part of the Order, I doubt I'd have a single good thing to say about your organization. Tilly's smile widened. My thoughts exactly. It's a wretched organization with no reason to exist. Leo couldn't help but remember how they used to complain about the Order all the time. Tilly had once joked that if she ever became president, the first thing she would do was lock up all the elders and set off 600 Ethereum crystal bombs inside. They looked at each other and shook their heads with a shared, wry smile. The tense atmosphere began to dissipate. Evelyn silently retracted her blood blade, thinking to herself that Leo must have brought up magic on purpose. This which seemed like the type who was obsessed with magical research. Still, she couldn't help but mutter internally. This kid's game was getting stronger and stronger. Once the air had cleared, Leo asked Tilly, "That mage from before, what was his deal? Was he a defector from your organization?" At the mention of this, Tilly sighed. "It's a good thing I was worried about you, and came to meet you. That mage was named Riel, one of the president's top enforcers. He's powerful. I didn't expect you to run into him." Seeing Leo's still confused expression, she smiled and continued to explain, "We have the president's men trapped on a small island not far from the coast. I set up a magical ward to block their communications, which is why they sent someone out to risk contacting the outside world." "So your order has finally split officially?" Leo asked. Tilly nodded. "It's a long story. Please come with me. I prepared lodging and food. You must be tired from your journey. I'll host a welcome for you." Since she put it that way, Leo didn't ask any more questions and followed behind her. Just then, Evelyn, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "Your Grace, if you'll pardon my impertinence, I don't think I'll be able to attend the banquet." Tilly stopped and turned, looking at Evelyn with a hint of confusion. Evelyn smiled. "You must have already figured it out. I am a vampire. I don't care for the seaside sun, and this place is not conducive to my practice. Besides, I wouldn't want to intrude on a reunion of old friends. You should eat and drink and not worry about me. I'll go find a cemetery to sleep in for a few nights. When he's ready to leave, we'll head back to New Haven." Evelyn's requests were all perfectly reasonable. But unexpectedly, Tilly's smile suddenly faded. "None of you are leaving." Her words made all three of them freeze. Helena clutched Leo's hand tighter, her gaze toward Tilly now tinged with hostility. Evelyn feigned confusion. "Why? It's not because of the town's curse, is it?" She let out a soft laugh. "This so-called curse must be your doing, right? Since that dead mage was trying to break out, it means the curse doesn't actually exist. It's probably just some kind of magical ward you've set up." Tilly's smile vanished completely. She looked at Evelyn coolly. "The president's supporters, many members of the Council of Elders, have surrounded the town. If you leave, you will run into danger. You're no match for them." "Is that so?" Evelyn laughed. They hadn't seen any so-called mages from the council on their way here. This was clearly just an excuse. "You..." Just as she was about to say more, Tilly seemed to lose all interest in giving Evelyn a reason to argue. She tilted her head, a hint of mischief in her purple eyes. "You don't like the sun, do you?" Evelyn paused. Seeing her smile, she suddenly had a very bad feeling. "Wait." Before she could finish, Tilly waved her hand with a cheerful grin. In an instant, the skin on Evelyn's body that was exposed to the sun suddenly darkened. To everyone's astonishment, a tiny little thundercloud, complete with flashing lightning, was now hovering directly over her head. "Ah, what is this thing? Where'd the sun go? Hey, why is it raining? Leo, I'm getting soaked. You have to do something about her."